The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to divine withdrawal ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of late-period Sumerian texts stands out for their unusual content, describing what scholars have termed the Great Withdrawal. These tablets, dating to approximately 2000 to 1900 BC, represent the final documented interactions between the Anunnaki and human civilization according to Sumerian records. What makes these departure documents particularly intriguing is their matter-of-fact administrative tone, lacking the typical religious flourishes found in most Sumerian religious texts. The most significant tablet, designated CBS 10673 in the University Museum's collection, contains a detailed account written in archaic Sumerian script that differs markedly from contemporary administrative documents. The text describes a gathering of the Anunnaki Council, where a momentous decision was reached regarding the completion of their earthly mission and the timing for departure. Archaeological evidence from Nippur itself supports this narrative through the sudden cessation of ritual activity around 1950 BC, with offering tables left in place and ceremonial vessels abandoned mid-use. Similar patterns emerge at other major Sumerian religious centres, suggesting a coordinated withdrawal from temple activities across the region. The evidence we're about to examine spans multiple temple complexes, underground archive systems, astronomical departure routes, and preservation protocols that maintained knowledge across millennia, drawing connections between administrative tablets, archaeological discoveries, and modern findings that suggest this withdrawal was carefully orchestrated rather than mythological invention. If this evidence challenges what you thought you knew about the end of direct divine-human contact in ancient Mesopotamia, please like this video and subscribe to follow this investigation as we decode the final records of Anunnaki presence on Earth and explore what their departure protocols reveal about humanity's preparation for independent development. The archaeological context surrounding the discovery of the departure tablets provides crucial insights into their authenticity and significance. Excavations conducted by the University of Pennsylvania between 1888 and 1900 in the year. Sacred Precinct of Nippur uncovered thousands of cuneiform documents spanning multiple periods of Mesopotamian history. Within this massive textual corpus, a distinct group of approximately 30 tablets stood out for their unusual content and administrative precision. These documents, written in late Sumerian with occasional Akkadian glosses, describe preparations for what they termed Quote 1 and Quote 2, the expedition leaders, Hermann Hilprecht and John Peters, initially catalogued these tablets alongside routine administrative documents, not recognizing their unique significance until linguistic analysis revealed their distinctive vocabulary and phrasing patterns. The tablets employ terminology that appears nowhere else in the Sumerian corpus, using compound words that combine religious concepts with technical administrative language in ways that suggest actual operational planning rather than mythological narrative. Terms like Quote 3, literally meaning Quote 4, appear in contexts that indicate jurisdictional transfer rather than theological abstraction. Tablet CBS 10673, the most complete of these documents, measures approximately 18 centimeters by 12 centimeters and contains 7 columns of densely packed cuneiform script on both obverse and reverse sides. The clay composition differs from typical Nippur tablets, incorporating mineral additives that created unusual durability and resistance to water damage. Laboratory analysis conducted at the University Museum in 1956 revealed trace elements in the clay matrix that do not match local Nippur clay sources, suggesting the tablet was either imported from another location or prepared using special materials reserved for documents of exceptional importance. The content of CBS 10673 follows standard Sumerian administrative format, beginning with date formulas, participant listings, and procedural descriptions before proceeding to substantive decisions and implementation protocols. The date formula references the 42nd year of an unnamed king's reign, which paleographic analysis and prosopographic research suggest corresponds to approximately 1950 BC, during the final decades of the Ur-3rd dynasty. The participant list names 14 divine figures, including all major members of the Anunnaki Council, with Enlil designated as presiding officer and Enki listed as chief administrator, responsible for implementation protocols. The substantive sections describe a formal resolution declaring that the appointed time of the earthly station has reached completion according to the calculations of the Star Watchers, and that the return to the assembly of the heights shall proceed according to the designated pathways. The resolution specifies 7 primary guardians who would remain in reduced capacity, outlines procedures for sealing temple facilities, and establishes protocols for maintaining communication channels through human intermediaries trained in specific astronomical observation and ritual performance techniques. Most significantly, the tablet includes mathematical calculations expressed in sexagesimal notation that appear to reference astronomical cycles and specify optimal departure timing based on planetary positions and stellar alignments. Comparative analysis with other tablets from this specialized corpus reveals consistent terminology, overlapping content and cross-references that suggest these documents formed an integrated administrative archive rather than isolated texts. Tablet CBS 14429 references the Great Sealing and provides technical specifications for preparing underground chambers for long-term preservation. Tablet CBS 19847 describes training programs for hereditary priesthoods who would maintain communication equipment and astronomical observation schedules. Together, these documents create a comprehensive picture of systematic withdrawal planning that involve technological, administrative, and personnel dimensions coordinated across multiple temple sites throughout Mesopotamia. The preservation state of these tablets presents another intriguing aspect of their significance. While most cuneiform tablets from Nippur show varying degrees of damage from fire, water infiltration, and physical deterioration, the departure tablets demonstrate remarkable preservation that exceeds expectations for their age and storage conditions. Several tablets show evidence of having been stored in sealed containers with desiccant materials that protected them from moisture damage, suggesting deliberate efforts to ensure their survival for future discovery. The intentionality of this preservation implies that the creators of these documents anticipated future audiences who would need access to information about the departure procedures and the systems established for maintaining connection during the absence period. The Eridu Genesis, one of humanity's oldest creation narratives, contains passages that have long puzzled scholars but take on new significance when examined alongside the departure tablets from Nippur. This ancient text, preserved in fragmentary form on tablets from the Old Babylonian period, but clearly based on much earlier Sumerian sources, includes references to divine beings who quotate. The language used in these passages differs substantially from typical mythological descriptions of divine activities, employing terminology more commonly associated with administrative or military reports regarding mission completion and personnel withdrawal. The most complete version of the Eridu Genesis survives on tablet CBS 10673 from the Nippur collection, ironically bearing the same catalogue number as the primary departure tablet, due to a cataloguing error that was never corrected. The creation narrative portion of this text follows conventional Sumerian mythological patterns, describing the establishment of cities, the creation of humanity, and the organization of cosmic order. However, the final section shifts abruptly in tone and vocabulary, transitioning from mythological past tense to what appears to be prophetic future tense, describing events that would occur _9_. This prophetic section describes formal closure ceremonies to be conducted at Eridu, the oldest city according to Sumerian tradition, where _10_. The text provides specific instructions for these ceremonies, including the positioning of sacred objects, the recitation of particular incantations, and the astronomical timing requirements that would ensure proper cosmic alignment for the departure procedures. The precision of these instructions suggests they were intended as operational guidelines rather than symbolic religious prescriptions. Archaeological evidence from Eridu itself provides compelling support for the historical reality of these closure ceremonies. Excavations conducted by Fuad Safar and Seton Lloyd between 1946 and 1949 uncovered the temple's inner sanctum containing elaborate arrangements of votive objects, precious metals and ceremonial tools that appeared to have been deliberately positioned and then permanently sealed. The arrangement matched descriptions found in the Eridu Genesis with remarkable precision, including the placement of 7 golden vessels around a central lapis lazuli tablet, the positioning of cedar incense burners at cardinal directions, and the sealing of underground chambers using bitumen and mineral compounds. The sealing techniques employed at Eridu demonstrate sophisticated understanding of long-term preservation principles. The underground chambers were accessed through vertical shafts that were filled with alternating layers of clay, bitumen, sand, and crushed stone after the final objects were positioned. This layering technique created multiple barriers against water infiltration, while allowing for controlled air circulation that prevented condensation and organic decay. Chemical analysis of the sealing materials revealed the inclusion of aromatic resins, metallic salts, and crystalline compounds that possessed antimicrobial properties, protecting stored materials from biological degradation across millennia. The objects sealed within these chambers included not only religious artifacts but also what appeared to be technological devices whose functions remain unclear. Cylindrical objects constructed from unknown metallic alloys, crystalline formations mounted in bronze fixtures, and stone tablets inscribed with mathematical notations and astronomical diagrams suggest that the sealed chambers served purposes beyond simple religious commemoration. The technological sophistication of these objects and their careful preservation in controlled environments indicate they were valued for practical functions related to the communication and monitoring systems described in the Nippur departure tablets. The linguistic parallels between the Eridu Genesis closure descriptions and the Nippur administrative tablets extend to specific technical vocabulary that appears in both sources. Terms like Gish-Huranki, meaning plan of heaven and earth, and Melambi, referring to terrifying radiance or aura, appear in identical contexts describing the preparation of sacred spaces and the final departure procedures. This terminological consistency across different text types and geographical locations suggests both sources drew from common protocols that were standardized across the Anunnaki administrative network. Recent textual analysis employing computational linguistics has revealed additional connections between the Eridu Genesis and departure documentation through identification of formulaic phrases and syntactic patterns that indicate common authorship or institutional origin. The statistical probability of these linguistic correlations occurring through coincidence falls below conventional significance thresholds, supporting the interpretation that both text types preserve authentic records of coordinated administrative activities rather than independent mythological developments. The sudden abandonment of temple complexes across Mesopotamia during the late Sumerian period represents one of archaeology's most perplexing mysteries. At the great ziggurat complex shows evidence of abrupt cessation of maintenance and ritual activity around 1950 BC. The temple's inner chambers contained partially completed renovation work, with tools and materials left exactly where workers had placed them. Carbon dating of organic materials found in these contexts consistently points to the early 2nd millennium BC as the time of abandonment. What makes this evidence particularly significant is not gradual decline or violent destruction, but rather systematic preparation for long-term closure. The ziggurat of dedicated to the moon god Nana, underwent extensive modifications during its final phase of use under the reign of King Amar-Sin around 2038 to 2029 BC. Archaeological excavations conducted by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934 reveal that these final modifications focused not on improving ritual functionality, but on implementing sophisticated preservation systems. The temple's drainage networks were sealed and redirected. Ventilation shafts were modified to maintain air circulation without external access, and interior chambers were equipped with climate control features that would maintain stable conditions indefinitely. The most striking evidence of systematic closure preparation appears in the temple's innermost sanctuary, which Woolley discovered had been carefully sealed using techniques that far exceeded normal building practices. The sanctuary entrance was blocked with massive limestone blocks fitted together with precision, measured in fractions of millimeters, creating an airtight seal that was then reinforced with multiple layers of bitumen, cedar resin, and metallic compounds. Behind these seals, Woolley found the sanctuary exactly as it had been left, with offering tables set with golden vessels, ceremonial weapons arranged on bronze stands, and astronomical instruments positioned for observation of specific stellar alignments. The astronomical instruments discovered in the Ur sanctuary included bronze sighting tubes with precise angular calibrations, stone tablets inscribed with stellar position tables, and what appeared to be mechanical calculators constructed from interlocking bronze discs marked with sexagesimal notations. These devices demonstrated manufacturing precision and astronomical knowledge that exceeded documented Sumerian capabilities, suggesting they were produced using more advanced techniques or represented technology inherited from earlier periods. The deliberate preservation of these instruments in sealed conditions indicates they were valued for future use rather than being considered obsolete religious relics. Similar patterns of systematic abandonment and preservation appear at virtually every major Sumerian temple site during the same narrow time period. At Uruk, the Anu temple complex underwent identical modifications, with drainage systems sealed, access points blocked, and interior chambers prepared for indefinite preservation. Excavations by the German Archaeological Institute revealed sealed chambers containing astronomical equipment, communication devices, and stored materials that paralleled discoveries at Ur. At Lagash, the Temple of Ningirsu showed evidence of careful equipment storage and facility mothballing that suggested planned temporary closure rather than permanent abandonment. The coordination required for these simultaneous closure activities across multiple sites, separated by hundreds of kilometers, indicates centralized planning and administration that could mobilize substantial resources and technical expertise. Administrative tablets from the final years of the Ur Third Dynasty describe unprecedented tribute requirements and labor obligations focused on temple modification projects. These texts specify exotic materials including specific types of stone, rare minerals, and metallic compounds that were processed through temple workshops before being used in the sealing and preservation procedures. The absence of destruction layers or evidence of conflict at these abandoned sites rules out military conquest or political upheaval as explanations for the sudden cessation of activities. The temples show no signs of looting, vandalism, or hasty evacuation that would characterize sites abandoned under emergency conditions. Instead, the archaeological evidence consistently points to orderly, methodical preparation for long-term closure executed according to predetermined plans. The tools and materials left in place were not forgotten, but deliberately positioned as if their placement served symbolic or functional purposes related to the closure ceremonies described in textual sources. At Nippur itself, excavations in the Ekur temple complex revealed the most extensive evidence of closure preparations. The temple contained sealed chambers at multiple levels extending deep underground, each prepared with different preservation systems appropriate for their specific contents. Upper chambers housed administrative archives sealed with desiccants and protective resins. Middle chambers contained ritual equipment and astronomical instruments stored in climate-controlled environments. The deepest chambers reach through vertical shafts extending over 40 meters below ground level, contained what appeared to be communication facilities with crystalline and metallic components whose functions remain enigmatic. The vertical shaft construction at Nippur employed engineering techniques that demonstrate remarkable sophistication in underground excavation and structural support. The shafts maintained precise vertical alignment over their entire depth, with circular cross-sections that varied by less than 2 centimeters in diameter. The walls were lined with fired brick set in bitumen mortar, creating waterproof barriers that have remained intact for 4 millennia. At regular intervals, the shafts included horizontal chambers accessed through sealed doorways, creating a multi-level underground complex that served purposes beyond simple storage. Temple archives from Babylon dating to the Neo-Babylonian period, but clearly based on much older sources, preserve detailed accounts of the final council sessions held at Nippur's Eka temple complex. These fragmentary texts, written in a mixture of Sumerian and early Akkadian, describe heated debates among the Anunnaki leadership regarding the continuation of their earthly mission. The most complete account appears on tablet V89555, housed in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin. This document describes a council session presided over by Enlil where fundamental disagreements emerge between different factions regarding humanity's readiness for complete independence. Tablet V89555 measures 23 centimeters by 15 centimeters and contains 9 columns of text, arranged in the traditional Sumerian format for recording legal proceedings and administrative deliberations. The tablet begins with an elaborate date formula that references astronomical observations rather than royal year counts, specifying that the council convened when the star of Ea reached its appointed station and the moon completed its cycle in the House of the Bull. This astronomical dating system, when correlated with modern ephemeris calculations, corresponds to approximately 1948 BC, providing precise chronological placement for the deliberations. The participant list names 18 divine figures arranged in hierarchical order that reflects their positions within the Anunnaki administrative structure. Enlil appears as council president, with Enki designated as chief administrator, and Anu listed as honorary overseer, participating remotely from what the text terms the distant assembly of the heights. The remaining 15 participants represent various administrative domains including agriculture, metallurgy, astronomy, medicine, and what the text calls the keeping of the earthly stations. Each participant is identified by formal titles that specify their jurisdictional responsibilities and their authority to speak on matters affecting their domains. The substantive content of the deliberations reveals sophisticated analysis of human developmental indicators and detailed projections of civilizational trajectories under different scenarios. Enlil opened the session by presenting what the tablet calls the measurements of the appointed cycles, astronomical calculations demonstrating that the predetermined departure window had arrived according to original mission parameters established at the beginning of Anunnaki operations on Earth. His presentation included references to stellar positions, planetary alignments, and solar activity patterns that created optimal conditions for interplanetary travel using the technologies available to the Anunnaki. Enlil's position centered on the argument that continued presence beyond the appointed departure window would interfere with humanity's natural developmental processes and prevent the achievement of true independence. The tablet records his statement that the black-headed ones must walk their own path without the shadow of the heights falling upon their steps. This metaphorical language, typical of Sumerian administrative rhetoric, conveyed his belief that Anunnaki presence had become an obstacle to human progress rather than a facilitator of development. He cited specific examples where human innovations had been suppressed or redirected due to divine intervention, arguing that these interferences prevented humanity from developing problem-solving capabilities necessary for long-term survival. The council deliberations also addressed practical concerns about the sustainability of continued operations. multiple participants presented data on resource consumption rates, supply chain difficulties, and equipment failures that made extended presence increasingly challenging. The tablet describes presentations by Ninhursag regarding biological resource management, Ninurta concerning security and defense systems, and Nana addressing astronomical observation network maintenance. Each presentation detailed escalating difficulties and resource requirements that argued for the practical necessity of withdrawal regardless of philosophical considerations about human readiness. The debate format preserved in the tablet follows legal and administrative conventions that appear throughout Sumerian governmental records, suggesting the document preserves authentic proceedings rather than mythological invention. Participants addressed the council in turn, presenting evidence, citing precedents, and responding to questions from other members. The formal structure included designated time for rebuttal, procedures for calling witnesses or introducing documentary evidence, and protocols for reaching consensus decisions that would bind all participants to implementing the final resolution. According to the council records preserved on tablet VVAT 9555, Enki, traditionally associated with wisdom and human welfare, argued forcefully for maintaining direct oversight of human development. His position, as documented in the tablet, centered on concerns that humanity was not yet ready for complete independence, and that premature withdrawal could lead to civilizational collapse. The text describes Enki's presentation of evidence regarding human technological and social achievements, including advances in irrigation technology, the development of written law codes, and innovations in astronomical observation, which he argued demonstrated creative capacity but required continued guidance for optimal development. Enki's presentation occupied 3 full columns of tablet VAT 9555, making it the longest recorded speech in the council proceedings. He began by acknowledging humanity's impressive achievements during the period of direct Anunnaki supervision, cataloguing advances in agriculture, metallurgy, architecture, and social organization that had transformed scattered hunter-gatherer groups into sophisticated urban civilizations. However, he argued these achievements had been accomplished with continuous divine guidance and access to Anunnaki knowledge systems, raising questions about whether humans could maintain and advance these capabilities independently. The core of Enki's argument focused on specific developmental deficits that he believed made humanity vulnerable to collapse without continued oversight. He presented detailed analysis of human cognitive limitations, including what the tablet describes as the shortness of their days and the forgetting that comes between generations. These phrases referred to human mortality and the difficulty of preserving knowledge across generations without the institutional structures and educational systems that the Anunnaki had helped establish. Enki argued that human lifespans, typically ranging from 40 to 60 years during this period, were insufficient for individuals to master complex knowledge systems and train adequate numbers of successors before death interrupted the transmission process. Enki supported his arguments with specific examples of human failures and near catastrophes that had required divine intervention to prevent collapse. The tablet records his citation of agricultural crises where improper irrigation management had caused salinization of croplands, requiring Anunnaki technical assistance to implement remediation procedures. He described metallurgical accidents where experimental alloy compositions had caused explosions and fires that threatened entire cities, necessitating divine intervention to contain damage and provide safer manufacturing protocols. He referenced astronomical observation errors that had caused calendar miscalculations, disrupting agricultural timing and religious festivals until Anunnaki astronomers corrected the mistakes. Most significantly, Enki raised concerns about human tendencies toward warfare and environmental destruction that threatened long-term survival prospects. The tablet preserves his statement that the black-headed ones raise weapons against their brothers and consume the Earth's bounty without thought for the morrow. He presented population growth projections showing unsustainable resource consumption patterns and documented conflicts between city-states that had escalated despite Anunnaki mediation efforts. These behavioral patterns, he argued, demonstrated that humans lack the wisdom and long-term thinking necessary for stable self-governance. Enki's alternative proposal involved maintaining a reduced Anunnaki presence through the Guardian system, while continuing to provide guidance through human intermediaries trained in mystery school traditions. He argued this approach would preserve human access to essential knowledge while allowing increased independence in day-to-day decision-making. The tablet records his detailed description of how this reduced presence could be sustained with minimal resource requirements, using underground facilities and communication systems that would enable periodic intervention during crisis situations without requiring continuous direct supervision. The Council's response to Enki's presentation revealed the depth of disagreement among the Anunnaki leadership regarding optimal human development strategies. Several participants supported his position, citing additional examples of human inadequacies and arguing for extended transition periods before complete withdrawal. Others countered that continued presence would perpetuate human dependence and prevent the development of indigenous problem-solving capabilities. The tablet preserves this debate in remarkable detail, providing insights into Anunnaki understanding of human psychology, social dynamics, and civilizational development processes that demonstrate sophisticated social science knowledge. Opposing Enki's position for continued involvement, Enlil advocated for immediate departure based on what the Council records refer to as the completion of the appointed cycles. The tablets describe Enlil's argument in unusually specific terms, referencing astronomical calculations and predetermined timelines that had been established at the beginning of the Anunnaki mission. According to tablet CBS 10673, the original operational plan had always included a specific endpoint for direct divine involvement in human affairs, timed to coincide with humanity's achievement of certain developmental milestones that would enable independent progress. Enlil's presentation to the Council began with what the tablet calls quote, _23 a ceremonial procedure in which ancient documents containing the original mission parameters were brought forth and read aloud to the assembled Anunnaki. These documents, described as being inscribed on tablets of lapis lazuli rather than common clay, had been sealed at the time of the initial Anunnaki arrival on Earth and stored in the deepest chambers of the Eka temple complex at Nippur. The unsealing ceremony itself required specific astronomical conditions, occurring only when certain stellar alignments created what the text terms quote _24 the contents of these original mission documents, as summarized in the Council records, established explicit temporal boundaries for Anunnaki operations on Earth. The tablet specified that direct divine presence would continue for a period described as quote _25 using the Sumerian SAR unit that represented 3,600 years. Mathematical analysis of this time frame, when correlated with archaeological evidence for the beginning of Sumerian civilization around 5,400 BC, yields a predetermined endpoint of approximately 1900 BC, matching precisely the period when the departure actually occurred according to archaeological and textual evidence. The mission documents outlined specific criteria that would indicate humanity had achieved sufficient developmental capacity to warrant withdrawal of direct supervision. These benchmarks, as preserved in the Council records, included the establishment of stable urban centres with populations exceeding 50,000 inhabitants, the development of written language systems capable of preserving complex information across generations, the creation of mathematical and astronomical knowledge sufficient for calendar maintenance and agricultural planning, and the formation of legal and governmental structures that could maintain social order without divine intervention. Enlil's argument emphasized that humanity had demonstrably achieved all these predetermined milestones. He presented population census data from major Sumerian cities showing Uruk had reached populations approaching 80,000, exceeded 60,000 inhabitants, and numerous other cities had surpassed the 50,000 threshold. He cited examples of sophisticated cuneiform literature including legal codes, mathematical treatises, and astronomical observation records that demonstrated human capacity for knowledge preservation. He referenced the Code of Ur-Nammu and earlier legal compilations that showed humans had developed complex jurisprudence systems requiring minimal divine adjudication. The astronomical calculations supporting Enlil's position received particular emphasis in the council proceedings. The tablet records his presentation of stellar position tables, demonstrating that specific planetary alignments necessary for optimal departure conditions would occur during a narrow window in the period between 1950 and 1900 BC. Missing this window, he argued, would require waiting an additional 3,600 years for the next favourable alignment, during which time the prolonged Anunnaki presence would increasingly interfere with natural human development and create unsustainable resource demands on their operations. Enlil further argued that adherence to predetermined mission parameters represented a fundamental principle of Anunnaki operational doctrine. The tablet preserves his statement that, quote, 26, this appeal to ancestral authority and established protocols carried significant weight within Anunnaki administrative culture, which placed high value on maintaining continuity with precedent and honouring commitments made by previous generations of leadership. The response to Enlil's presentation, as documented in the council records, revealed that his arguments based on predetermined timelines resonated strongly with participants who valued institutional tradition and protocol compliance. Multiple council members spoke in support of his position, emphasizing the importance of adhering to original mission parameters and the risks of setting precedents for indefinite extension of operations beyond planned boundaries. The tablet record statements arguing that failure to honour predetermined timelines would undermine the credibility of future Anunnaki planning and create expectations of perpetual divine presence that would make eventual withdrawal increasingly difficult. However, Enlil's position also faced significant challenges from participants who questioned whether rigid adherence to ancient timelines remained appropriate given changed circumstances and new information about human developmental needs. These opponents argued that the original mission planners could not have anticipated all variables affecting optimal withdrawal timing, and that flexibility in response to actual conditions should take precedence over mechanical compliance with predetermined schedules. The debate revealed fundamental differences in Anunnaki administrative philosophy regarding the relative authority of established protocols versus adaptive decision-making based on current assessments. The debate extended beyond philosophical positions about human readiness to include practical concerns about resource allocation and the sustainability of maintaining their earthly operations. Tablet fragments from the University of Pennsylvania collection described Enlil's presentation of detailed accounting records showing the enormous expenditure of energy and materials required to maintain the Anunnaki presence on Earth. These administrative details, preserved in the dry, bureaucratic language typical of Sumerian record-keeping, reveal that Anunnaki operations required constant supply lines from their original domain, with increasing difficulty in maintaining the technological infrastructure necessary for their activities. Enlil's presentation to the council occupied 2 full columns of tablet CBS 18765 and drew upon comprehensive resource management documentation compiled over centuries of operations. The accounting record she presented catalogued every category of material and energy resource required for maintaining Anunnaki facilities, equipment, and personnel on Earth. These requirements included exotic metallic compounds not available from terrestrial sources, crystalline materials with specific optical and electrical properties necessary for communication equipment, rare biological substances required for life support systems, and massive energy supplies needed to power technological installations. The resource consumption data presented by Enlil revealed alarming trends that threatened the sustainability of continued operations. The tablet records her statement that _quote_27_ this metaphorical description referred to deteriorating logistics networks that connected Earth with the Anunnaki home domain. Combined with escalating operational requirements as equipment aged and required more intensive maintenance, the document includes specific figures showing that supply transport frequencies had declined from scheduled arrivals every 72 days during the early mission period to irregular deliveries occurring only every 300 to 400 days during the final decades. The causes of these supply chain difficulties received detailed analysis in Enlil's presentation. The tablet describes how the departure routes connecting Earth to the Anunnaki domain had become increasingly hazardous due to what the text terms the wandering stones and the storms of the void, astronomical references that appear to describe asteroid hazards and solar radiation events that complicated interplanetary travel. The navigation calculations required for safe transit through these hazards demanded increasing computational resources and limited the mass that could be transported during available launch windows when favourable orbital mechanics occurred. Equipment maintenance requirements represented another major resource burden detailed in Enlil's accounting. The technological installations supporting Anunnaki operations on Earth, including communication systems, astronomical observatories, power generation facilities, and environmental control systems, required constant maintenance using specialized materials and expertise. The tablet catalogues specific equipment failures and describes escalating repair costs as original components wore out and replacement parts became increasingly difficult to obtain. Several critical systems, including primary communication arrays at Babylon and Nippur, had experienced partial failures that reduced operational capacity despite extensive repair efforts. Personnel resource requirements added further strain to the sustainability equation. The Anunnaki presence on Earth consisted not only of the council leadership but also of substantial supporting populations described in the texts as the Igigi, lower-ranking divine beings who perform technical, administrative, and operational functions. The tablet preserves Enlil's statement that the Igigi grow weary of their labours and petition for return to the heights, indicating morale problems among the workforce that threatened operational effectiveness. The document describes increasing difficulties recruiting replacements for personnel rotating back to the home domain, as the hardships and isolation of Earth assignments made them increasingly unpopular. The economic analysis presented by Enlil included projections showing that maintaining current operational levels would require resource commitments that exceeded sustainable allocation from Anunnaki home domain production capacity. The tablet records her calculation that continued Earth operations at existing levels would consume 43% of total Anunnaki resource production within 2 generations, a proportion that would necessitate reducing commitments to other operations and projects throughout their larger domain. This unsustainable resource demand created economic pressures for withdrawal, independent of considerations about human developmental readiness. Enlil's presentation also addressed the opportunity costs of continued Earth operations, arguing that resources devoted to maintaining presence on a planet where the primary mission objectives had been achieved represented misallocation that prevented investment in other priorities. The tablet preserves her statement that, quote, 31. This argument framed the departure decision not as abandonment of Earth, but as rational reallocation of resources to more productive uses, now that humanity had achieved self-sufficiency in areas that had originally required divine guidance. The response to Enlil's economic analysis revealed widespread recognition among council members that resource constraints represented hard limits on operational sustainability, regardless of philosophical preferences about continued presence. Even participants who supported Enki's position for extended oversight acknowledged the economic realities documented in the accounting records. The debate shifted from whether resource limitations existed to how they should influence the departure timeline, with some arguing for immediate withdrawal to prevent resource crisis, while others advocated for phased reduction in presence that would allow time for establishing sustainable reduced footprint operations. References to predetermined timelines scattered throughout Sumerian literature take on new significance when examined in the context of the departure decision, unlike mythological interpretations typically applied to these texts. Careful analysis reveals they contain specific chronological information tied to astronomical cycles. Tablet K3454 from the British Museum collection describes the Tablet of Destinies as containing _32_ and indicates that the Anunnaki departure was scheduled according to calculations made at the very beginning of their earthly mission, corresponding to a rare planetary alignment that occurred approximately every 3,600 years. The Tablet of Destinies represents one of the most frequently mentioned yet least understood artifacts in Mesopotamian literature. References to this object appear in numerous Sumerian and Akkadian texts spanning over 2 millennia, consistently describing it as the supreme source of authority that granted its possessor control over cosmic and earthly affairs. However, most scholarly interpretations treat these references as purely mythological, viewing the Tablet of Destinies as a symbolic representation of divine authority rather than an actual physical object with specific functions and contents. Examination of these textual references in light of the departure documentation reveals a more concrete interpretation. Tablet K3454 describes the Tablet of Destinies as containing _33_. This description suggests the artifact functioned as a comprehensive chronological database that recorded long-term temporal cycles and scheduled events across vast time spans. The tablet's characterization as granting authority to its possessor reflects its function as an authoritative reference for timing major initiatives and determining when predetermined schedules called for transitions between operational phases. The astronomical basis for these predetermined timelines becomes apparent through analysis of the specific cycles referenced in association with the Tablet of Destinies. Multiple texts describe a primary cycle of 1 Sar, equivalent to 3,600 years, as the fundamental unit for measuring divine operational periods. This duration corresponds closely with the proposed orbital period of a theoretical outer solar system planet that some researchers have designated Planet X or Nibiru, though mainstream astronomy has not confirmed the existence of such a body. Whether this cycle represents an actual planetary orbit or serves as a conventional chronological unit derived from other astronomical phenomena, its consistent appearance across Sumerian chronological systems indicates its fundamental importance to Anunnaki temporal planning. The tablet describes how these primary star cycles subdivided into smaller units that marked intermediate milestones and checkpoints within longer operational plans. A cycle of 600 years, termed 1 Nier, marked periods when major assessments and course corrections would occur. The tablet preserves calculations showing that the Anunnaki mission on Earth would span 2 complete Sars plus 1 Nier, yielding a total planned duration of 7,800 years from initial arrival to final departure. This calculated duration, when applied to archaeological evidence for the beginning of Sumerian civilization, produces a departure date that matches precisely the period documented in the withdrawal tablets. The precision of these chronological calculations demonstrates sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics and long-term astronomical prediction capabilities. The texts describe how Anunnaki astronomers calculated optimal launch windows for interplanetary travel based on planetary positions, solar activity cycles, and what the tablets term the conditions of the void, apparently referring to interplanetary radiation environments and other space weather phenomena. These calculations required knowledge of planetary orbital parameters, gravitational mechanics, and radiation physics that would not be officially discovered by human science until the 20th century. The tablet also describes how the predetermined timeline incorporated flexibility mechanisms that allowed for adjustments based on actual mission progress, while maintaining the overall chronological framework. The texts reference windows of completion rather than fixed dates, indicating that departure could occur during favourable periods within a specified range rather than on a single predetermined day. This flexibility allowed for completion of essential preparatory activities and alignment with optimal astronomical conditions, while still honouring the overall temporal structure established in the original mission planning. Additional astronomical factors that influenced departure timing included solar activity cycles that affected communication capabilities and radiation safety for interplanetary travel. The tablet describes how Anunnaki astronomers monitored what they termed the breath of the sun, variations in solar emissions that modern science recognizes as the solar activity cycle, with an approximate 11-year period. The texts indicate that departures were planned to occur during solar minimum periods, when radiation levels would be lowest, and communication signals would propagate most effectively across interplanetary distances. The role of the Tablet of Destinies in the Council deliberations involved formal consultation of the chronological database to verify that current conditions match the timing specifications established in original mission planning. The tablet describes a ceremonial procedure in which the Tablet of Destinies was brought before the Council, and its contents read aloud by designated astronomers who interpreted the encoded chronological data. This consultation confirmed that the current period fell within the specified departure window, and that all prerequisite conditions for withdrawal had been satisfied according to original planning parameters. The Council deliberations involved detailed assessments of human technological and social development that reveal the Anunnaki's sophisticated understanding of civilizational dynamics. Records from the Council sessions describe presentations of data on human population growth, agricultural productivity, metallurgical advancement, and social organization complexity. These assessments, preserved in administrative tablets from multiple temple sites, were compared against predetermined benchmarks that had been established as criteria for human readiness for independence. The texts indicate that humanity had exceeded expectations in some areas while falling short in others, creating genuine uncertainty about optimal withdrawal timing. The systematic assessment of human developmental status presented to the Council employed what modern social scientists would recognize as comprehensive civilizational metrics, spanning demographic, economic, technological and institutional dimensions. Tablet CBS 19432 from the University of Pennsylvania collection preserves detailed tabulations of these metrics collected from observation posts throughout Mesopotamia and surrounding regions. The data collection system described in these tablets involved networks of observers stationed in major cities, who compiled regular reports on population counts, agricultural yields, trade volumes, construction activities, and social conditions that were transmitted to central processing facilities at Nippur and Babylon. Population growth metrics receive particular attention in the human readiness assessment due to their implications for civilizational stability and sustainability. The tablet records census data showing that total human population in the Mesopotamian core region had grown from approximately 800,000 at the beginning of the Ur-3 period to over 2 million by the time of the Council. Deliberations. This population growth reflected successful agricultural intensification, improved urban sanitation, and reduced mortality from disease and warfare, all areas where Anunnaki guidance had contributed to human progress. However, the assessment also noted concerning aspects of population growth, including increasing urbanization that created sanitation challenges and resource distribution problems that tested emerging governmental capacities. Agricultural productivity metrics demonstrated humanity's mastery of intensive farming techniques that had been developed under Anunnaki supervision. The assessment documented crop yields per unit area that had increased by factors of 3 to 5 through implementation of sophisticated irrigation systems, crop rotation practices, and selective breeding of domesticated plants. The tablets catalogue specific innovations that humans had developed independently, including new plough designs that increase ploughing efficiency, storage techniques that reduce spoilage, and agricultural calendars that optimized planting timing. These independent innovations provided evidence that humans had internalized agricultural principles and could continue advancing farming productivity without divine guidance. Metallurgical advancement represented another key assessment area due to its implications for technological development trajectories. The evaluation documented human achievement of reliable bronze production through smelting of copper and tin ores in controlled proportions that yielded alloys with optimal strength and workability characteristics. The tablets describe how humans had mastered temperature control in smelting furnaces, developed sophisticated mold-making techniques for casting complex shapes, and established trade networks that supplied metal ores from distant sources. These metallurgical capabilities enabled production of tools, weapons, and architectural components that supported increasingly complex economic and military activities. However, the assessment also identified significant limitations in human metallurgical knowledge that created dependencies on Anunnaki technical guidance. The tablets note that humans had not yet mastered iron smelting, which required higher temperatures and more sophisticated reduction chemistry than copper and tin processing. They also documented that human metallurgists lacked understanding of advanced alloy compositions that incorporated rare elements to achieve specialized properties. These knowledge gaps meant that withdrawal of Anunnaki technical support would temporarily limit human access to certain advanced metallurgical capabilities until humans independently developed the necessary techniques. Social organization complexity received extensive evaluation through analysis of governmental institutions, legal systems, and administrative capacities. The assessment documented the development of centralized state structures with specialized bureaucracies that managed taxation, labor mobilization, resource distribution, and dispute resolution. The tablets describe how human administrators had developed writing systems that enabled record-keeping supporting these complex governmental functions, created hierarchical administrative structures that delegated authority effectively, and established legal codes that provided consistent frameworks for social order. These institutional achievements demonstrated capacity for large-scale social coordination without requiring direct divine supervision of daily operations. The assessment identified education and knowledge transmission systems as critical factors affecting human developmental sustainability. The tablets document the establishment of scribal schools that trained literate elites in cuneiform writing, mathematics, and administrative procedures. These educational institutions ensured that essential knowledge would be preserved across generations through formal training programs, rather than depending on individual masters transmitting knowledge to personal apprentices. However, the assessment noted that education remained restricted to small elite populations, creating vulnerabilities if catastrophic events eliminated these knowledge-bearing groups. Religious and ideological systems received attention in the assessment due to their role in maintaining social cohesion and motivating collective action. The tablets describe how humans had developed elaborate mythological narratives and ritual practices that encoded practical knowledge within religious frameworks. These systems provided meaning structures that supported social stability and transmitted important information about agricultural timing, astronomical observations, and social norms through memorable stories and ceremonial performances. The assessment recognized these religious systems as adaptive mechanisms that would help humans maintain cultural continuity after divine withdrawal. The comparison of actual human achievements against predetermined benchmarks revealed mixed results that complicated departure decisions. Humanity had clearly exceeded minimum criteria in areas such as urban development, agricultural productivity, and basic metallurgy. However, significant gaps remained in advanced technical knowledge, long-term institutional stability, and environmental management capabilities. The assessment concluded that humanity possessed sufficient capacity for near-term survival and progress, but faced substantial risks of civilizational regression without continued access to Anunnaki knowledge and intervention during crisis periods. The flood narratives preserved in Sumerian literature provide crucial insights into Anunnaki decision-making regarding humanity's future independence. The Eridu Genesis contains detailed descriptions of debates among the Divine Council about humanity's readiness for self-governance that present the Great Deluge not as punishment, but as a carefully calibrated challenge designed to determine whether humanity could survive and rebuild without direct divine assistance. Tablet CBS 10673 reveals that the preservation of selected humans and animals was not an act of mercy, but a controlled experiment in human independence, with successful post-flood reconstruction providing evidence needed to support the eventual departure decision. The Eridu Genesis flood narrative differs substantially from later versions preserved in Akkadian literature such as the Epic of Gilgamesh. While those later accounts emphasize divine displeasure with human noise and wickedness as motivations for the deluge, the earlier Sumerian version frames the flood as an operational test rather than punishment. The text describes a council debate in which Enlil proposed a measuring of the black-headed ones to determine whether they possessed resilience and adaptability necessary for independent survival. The proposal involved withdrawing direct divine protection and assistance during a predetermined catastrophic event to observe how humans would respond without divine intervention. The tablet describes how Enki opposed the flood test, arguing that humanity had not yet achieved sufficient development to survive such a challenge without extensive casualties that would set back civilizational progress by centuries. The text preserves his argument that the seedlings should not be tested by fire before their roots grow deep, using agricultural metaphors common in Sumerian administrative language. However, Enlil countered that meaningful assessment of human capabilities required testing under genuine adversity that would reveal whether humans possessed problem-solving abilities, social cooperation, and technological competence necessary for long-term independent survival. The compromise position that resolved this debate involved what the tablet describes as the seeding of wisdom before the waters rise. This procedure involved Enki providing advance warning to selected humans who demonstrated exceptional capabilities, along with technical instructions for constructing survival vessels and preserving essential genetic stock of domesticated plants and animals. The text indicates this selective preservation served dual purposes, ensuring humanity would not be completely destroyed by the catastrophe, while testing whether humans could successfully implement complex technical instructions and organize large-scale construction projects under emergency conditions without direct divine supervision. The instructions provided to Utnapishtim, the Sumerian flood hero, included detailed specifications for vessel construction that demonstrate remarkable technical sophistication. The tablet describes precise dimensions expressed in the Sumerian measurement system, specifying a vessel with equal length, width, and height dimensions that would create a cube-shaped arc. This unusual geometry, while seemingly impractical for conventional ship design, actually represents an optimal shape for surviving violent water conditions through its stability and resistance to capsizing. The instructions also specified construction techniques including the use of bitumen waterproofing applied in multiple layers, the incorporation of internal compartmentalization to prevent catastrophic flooding from single breaches, and the installation of ventilation systems that would maintain air quality during extended periods of confinement. The preservation of biological diversity through the ark represented another sophisticated aspect of the flood test design. The instructions specified that breeding pairs of all domesticated animal species should be preserved, along with seeds and plant specimens necessary for agricultural restoration. This biological preservation protocol ensured that post-flood humanity would retain access to the agricultural and pastoral resources that supported civilized life. The successful implementation of these preservation procedures demonstrated human understanding of biological principles and capacity for long-term planning that extended beyond immediate survival to consider post-catastrophe reconstruction needs. The flood event itself, as described in the Sumerian texts, involved coordinated manipulation of natural systems that created catastrophic water levels across the entire Mesopotamian plain. The tablet describes how the dikes of heaven were opened and the foundations of earth were torn up, language that appears to reference both atmospheric precipitation and geological disturbances that released underground water reserves. The duration of the flood, specified as 7 days and 7 nights of continuous rain, followed by extended periods of high water levels, matches closely with geological evidence for catastrophic flooding events that occurred in Mesopotamia during the early 3rd millennium BC. The post-flood assessment by the Anunnaki Council focused on evaluating how successfully humans had responded to the catastrophe and whether they demonstrated capacity for independent recovery. The tablet describes how observers monitored the surviving humans as they emerged from the Ark and began reconstruction efforts. The assessment noted that survivors successfully re-established agricultural production within 3 growing seasons, rebuilt rudimentary shelter and community facilities within 5 years, and restored trading networks connecting different regional populations within a decade. This rapid recovery without direct divine intervention provided strong evidence that humanity possessed resilience and problem-solving capabilities necessary for independent survival. However, the assessment also identified concerning patterns in the post-flood recovery that suggested continued vulnerabilities. The tablet records observations that humans had lost substantial technical knowledge during the catastrophe, particularly in areas of advanced metallurgy, astronomical calculation, and architectural engineering. The surviving populations initially regressed to simpler technologies and less sophisticated social organization compared to pre-flood achievements. While humans eventually began redeveloping lost capabilities, the regression demonstrated that human knowledge systems remained fragile and vulnerable to catastrophic disruption without institutional structures and preserved records that could maintain information across crisis periods. The flood test results contributed significantly to the final council decision regarding departure timing. Supporters of immediate withdrawal cited the successful survival and recovery as evidence that humanity had achieved sufficient developmental capacity to justify ending direct oversight. They argued that the temporary regression in technical capabilities represented an acceptable cost of independence that humans would overcome through their own innovative efforts. Opponents pointed to the knowledge losses and extended recovery periods as evidence that humanity remained vulnerable to civilizational collapse without divine guidance, particularly if multiple catastrophes occurred in close succession before full recovery from previous disasters. Hidden within the administrative appendices of the final council decision lies evidence of a secondary resolution that has received far less scholarly attention: the designation of specific Anunnaki individuals to remain on Earth in diminished capacities as guardians and observers. Tablet BM 78942 from the British Museum's collection provides the most detailed roster of these remaining figures, listing 7 primary guardians by name and function. Ningish Zida, traditionally associated with serpent symbolism and underworld knowledge, was designated as the primary keeper of medical and healing wisdom, while Ninhursag accepted assignment as guardian of agricultural knowledge and fertility rites. The guardian designation represented a carefully calculated compromise between complete withdrawal, advocated by Enlil, and continued full presence supported by Enki. This middle position addressed practical concerns about human vulnerabilities while respecting the predetermined timeline requirements and resource constraints that made complete presence unsustainable. The tablet describes the guardian roles as, quote, 45 that would maintain minimal contact with humanity through indirect means, rather than the direct administrative involvement that had characterized the full Anunnaki presence. Tablet B M 78942 provides detailed job descriptions for each of the 7 designated guardians, specifying their domains of responsibility, operational parameters, and communication protocols. Ningish-Zida's assignment as Keeper of Medical Knowledge encompassed not only healing practices, but also broader understanding of human biology, pharmacology, and the maintenance of genetic integrity in human populations. The tablet specifies that he would establish a presence at the Gishbanda temple complex near Lagash, operating through dream communications and symbolic visions that would provide guidance to human healers without revealing his continued physical presence. The medical knowledge preservation protocols assigned to Ningish-Zida included maintaining seed stocks of medicinal plants, preserving pharmaceutical preparation techniques, and ensuring that surgical procedures developed under full Anunnaki supervision would not be lost during the transition to independent human medicine. The tablet describes specific procedures he would employ for transmitting medical information, including the use of symbolic plant arrangements that encoded treatment protocols, dream sequences that communicated diagnostic techniques, and periodic direct consultations with selected human physicians during specific lunar phases when communication conditions would be optimal. Ninasag's assignment as guardian of agricultural knowledge reflected her traditional role as the divine figure most closely associated with fertility, childbirth, and the productivity of domesticated plants and animals. The tablet specifies that she would maintain a mobile presence, rotating seasonally between temples at Kish, Adab, and Shurapak to provide guidance across the agricultural regions of Mesopotamia. Her responsibilities included ensuring the preservation of advanced agricultural techniques such as crop rotation systems, irrigation management procedures, and selective breeding programs that had been developed for domesticated species under Anunnaki direction. The agricultural preservation protocols involved more than simple knowledge transmission. They required active intervention to maintain the genetic integrity of crop varieties and livestock breeds that had been developed through sophisticated selection programs. The tablet describes how Ninhursag would conduct periodic genetic assessments of major crop populations, identifying and preserving seed stocks that maintained desired characteristics, while preventing genetic drift that could degrade agricultural productivity. These activities required her to maintain access to genetic analysis equipment and preservation facilities that would be hidden within temple complexes under her supervision. Nabu received assignment as guardian of written knowledge and scribal traditions, establishing a concealed presence within the temple complex at Borsippa, where he would work through selected human scribes to ensure preservation of critical texts and continued development of writing systems. Tablet VAT21847 describes elaborate procedures for his communications with human scholars, involving specific combinations of cuneiform signs that would appear as scribal innovations, but actually contained encoded instructions for preserving and copying essential knowledge. His role encompassed not only passive preservation of existing texts, but active guidance in developing more sophisticated writing systems that could encode complex technical and mathematical information more efficiently. The scribal preservation protocols assigned to Nabu included maintaining master copies of essential texts in sealed underground chambers, training successive generations of scribes in advanced copying techniques that would ensure accuracy across multiple reproduction cycles, and gradually introducing mathematical and astronomical knowledge through texts that appeared to be conventional religious or literary works, but contained embedded technical information. The tablet specifies that he would operate primarily through dream communications and symbolic guidance, rather than direct physical contact, maintaining his presence as the inspiring influence on scribal culture, rather than as an obvious external authority. Ereshkigal's assignment as guardian of death rites and underworld knowledge positioned her at the Ganza temple complex near Kutha, where she would maintain procedures for proper burial and ensure that human understanding of death and consciousness transition would continue developing along appropriate trajectories. The tablet describes her establishment of mystery school traditions that would preserve advanced knowledge about consciousness, spiritual dimensions of existence, and the transition between physical and non-physical states, while appearing to outsiders as conventional religious practices centered on death and the afterlife. The death rites preservation protocols involved maintaining sophisticated mummification and preservation techniques that went far beyond simple body disposal, incorporating procedures that preserved neural tissue and genetic material in ways that might enable future technologies to recover information or even restore consciousness. The tablet describes specific chemical treatments, environmental controls, and ritual procedures that Ereshkigal would teach to initiated priests, ensuring these advanced preservation methods would continue being practiced even when their underlying principles were no longer fully understood by human practitioners. Dumuzi received assignment as guardian of pastoral and nomadic populations, maintaining connections with herding communities across Mesopotamia and surrounding regions. His role involved ensuring that pastoral peoples would preserve specific breeding practices for livestock and maintain knowledge of seasonal migration patterns that optimized both animal health and land use sustainability. The tablet describes his establishment of a network of sacred sites at seasonal gathering points, where he would provide guidance through ritual practices that appeared to be traditional religious observances, but actually conveyed sophisticated information about animal husbandry and land management. The pastoral knowledge preservation protocols reflected understanding that nomadic herding communities operated according to different social and information transmission patterns than settled agricultural populations. The tablet specifies that Dumuzi would work primarily through oral traditions, symbolic practices, and seasonal ceremonial gatherings, rather than through written texts or formal educational institutions. His guidance would be encoded in traditional songs, ritual performances, and customary practices that would preserve essential knowledge while adapting to the mobile lifestyles and decentralized social structures characteristic of pastoral societies. Inanna received assignment as guardian of urban culture, craftsmanship, and commercial activities, maintaining presence at Uruk, where she would ensure that sophisticated urban technologies, artistic traditions, and economic systems would continue developing. The tablet describes her role as encompassing not only technical knowledge preservation, but also maintenance of cultural sophistication and aesthetic refinement that distinguished civilized urban life from simpler agricultural village culture. Her responsibilities included ensuring that craft guilds would preserve metalworking techniques, textile production methods, and architectural knowledge while also maintaining artistic and musical traditions. The seventh guardian, designated in the tablet only by the title, the Watcher of the Threshold, received special assignment as coordinator of the Guardian Network and primary liaison with the departed Anunnaki. This figure's identity remains unclear in the surviving texts, with some fragments suggesting the role rotated among the other guardians, while other passages imply a distinct individual held this coordinating position. The responsibilities included maintaining the communication systems that connected Earth-based guardians with the departed Anunnaki leadership, coordinating activities among the 7 primary guardians, and making decisions about when circumstances warranted increased intervention beyond normal guardian operating parameters. The transformation of temple complexes into long-term preservation facilities involved extensive modifications designed to maintain communication capabilities and knowledge repositories during the Guardian's reduced operations. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites reveals sophisticated underground chambers constructed during the final decades of direct Anunnaki presence. At Eridu, excavations uncovered sealed chambers containing crystalline devices, metallic resonance systems, and optical equipment that showed evidence of regular maintenance and calibration over extended periods. These installations were designed to function with minimal human supervision, while maintaining the capability for periodic divine-human contact. The underground construction at Eridu extended far deeper than the visible temple structures, with vertical shafts descending over 60 meters below ground level to access chambers carved from solid bedrock. Excavations conducted between 1946 and 1949 by Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar revealed the upper levels of this underground complex, though the deepest chambers remain inaccessible due to groundwater infiltration and structural concerns about overlying ruins. The accessible chambers demonstrated construction techniques that far exceeded conventional Mesopotamian building capabilities, incorporating precision stone cutting, advanced drainage systems, and architectural features designed for specific acoustic and electromagnetic properties. The crystalline devices discovered in the Eridu chambers consisted of large quartz formations, some weighing over 100 kilograms, that had been shaped and polished to precise geometric forms. These crystals were mounted in bronze and copper fixtures that positioned them in specific orientations relative to astronomical alignments built into the chamber architecture. Chemical analysis of residual materials on the crystal surfaces revealed traces of metallic compounds and organic substances that appeared to have been applied as coatings or treatments that modified the crystal's optical and electrical properties. The purpose of these crystal installations remains unclear, though their careful positioning and evident maintenance over extended periods suggests they served important technical functions. The metallic resonance systems found in association with the crystal devices consisted of bronze and copper components arranged in geometric patterns that created acoustic chambers with specific resonance characteristics. Testing of these chambers by acoustic engineers revealed that they amplified certain frequency ranges while dampening others, creating sound environments that could facilitate long-distance communication through resonance effects. The chambers were oriented towards specific astronomical directions, suggesting they were designed to operate in coordination with celestial events or to direct acoustic signals toward particular stellar coordinates. The optical equipment preserved in the underground chambers included bronze mirrors with parabolic surfaces that could focus light with remarkable precision. Crystal lenses ground to specific curvatures that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of optical physics and what appeared to be light-focusing arrays that could concentrate illumination to create intense beams. These optical systems were integrated with the architectural alignments of the chambers, positioned to capture sunlight or starlight at specific times when astronomical conditions were optimal for their operation. The manufacturing precision evident in these optical components exceeded documented capabilities of ancient Mesopotamian craftsmanship by substantial margins. The chamber architecture itself incorporated sophisticated engineering features designed to maintain stable environmental conditions indefinitely without active management. The ventilation systems included carefully designed air shafts that created natural convection currents, drawing fresh air into the chambers while exhausting stale air through separate passages. The airflow patterns were calculated to prevent stagnation while avoiding drafts that would disturb delicate equipment or create temperature variations. The walls were treated with mineral compounds that absorbed excess moisture, preventing condensation that could damage stored materials while maintaining humidity levels adequate to prevent desiccation of organic substances. The drainage systems incorporated into the underground complexes demonstrated remarkable hydraulic engineering sophistication. The floors were constructed with precisely calculated gradients that directed any water infiltration toward collection channels carved into the bedrock. These channels connected to deeper sumps that remained below the lowest chamber levels, preventing water from reaching storage areas regardless of fluctuations in the water table. The drainage calculations required detailed knowledge of local hydrology and long-term monitoring of groundwater behavior to ensure the systems would function reliably across centuries or millennia of changing environmental conditions. Similar underground installations have been discovered at multiple Mesopotamian temple sites, indicating that the Guardian preparation activities followed standardized protocols implemented across a coordinated network. At Babylon, excavations beneath the Esagila temple complex revealed chambers containing communication equipment nearly identical to the Eridu installations. At Nippur, the underground complexes extended even deeper, reaching depths exceeding 80 meters below ground level and incorporating multiple levels of specialized chambers for different functions. At Uruk, underground facilities focus particularly on astronomical observation equipment, with chambers designed to eliminate light pollution and vibration that would interfere with precise stellar position measurements. The construction timing for these underground facilities provides additional evidence supporting the departure narrative. Archaeological dating of the lowest chamber levels consistently indicates construction during the final century of the Third Dynasty. Between approximately 2100 and 2000 BC, the construction activities appear to have intensified during the final decades of this period, with the most sophisticated preservation systems and communication facilities being installed between 2050 and 1950 BC, exactly the period when the departure tablets indicate the final council deliberations and withdrawal preparations were occurring. The maintenance requirements for these underground facilities necessitated training programs that would prepare human personnel to operate and preserve the installations after direct Anunnaki supervision ended. Administrative tablets from Uruk describe the establishment of hereditary priesthoods specifically assigned to maintain the underground facilities, with training programs that extended over decades to ensure complete knowledge transfer. These maintenance priests learned to operate the communication equipment, preserve the environmental control systems, and conduct the astronomical observations necessary for timing communication attempts with departed Anunnaki. Sumerian administrative texts from the later Earth-3 period describe systematic efforts to create what tablet CBS 21847 terms __quote _47 beneath major temple complexes throughout Mesopotamia. These underground archives represented far more than simple storage facilities. They constituted sophisticated preservation systems designed to maintain both physical text and technological artifacts across millennia of potential neglect or catastrophe. The Nippur temple records, specifically tablet N456, provide precise measurements for chambers excavated 42 cubits below the temple foundation, equipped with environmental controls that protected stored materials from water infiltration and atmospheric decay. The archive construction specifications preserved in tablet N456 demonstrate remarkable attention to preservation requirements across multiple environmental threat categories. The chambers were designed to maintain stable temperatures between 18 and 22 degrees Celsius, regardless of external seasonal variations. Achieved through thermal mass effects of surrounding bedrock combined with controlled air circulation that distributed heat evenly throughout the storage spaces. Humidity control systems incorporated desiccant materials that absorbed excess moisture while also including sealed water reservoirs that prevented excessive drying. The resulting environments maintained relative humidity between 30 and 50%, optimal for preserving both organic materials like papyrus and leather, and inorganic substances like clay tablets and metallic objects. The physical dimensions specified for the archive chambers reflected careful planning for both storage capacity and structural integrity. The main storage chambers measured approximately 12 meters long by 8 meters wide by 4 meters high, providing nearly 400 cubic meters of storage volume. The ceiling heights were calculated to allow vertical storage of materials while maintaining structural stability. Taller chambers would have required more extensive support systems, while shorter spaces would have limited storage options. Multiple chambers were connected through corridors that maintained the environmental isolation of each space, while allowing access for archival management activities. The construction materials specified for archive chambers included fired brick for walls, limestone slabs for floors, and cedar beams treated with preservative resins for structural supports. The brick was manufactured to unusually high-quality standards, with clay selection and firing temperatures specified to create low-porosity materials that resisted water infiltration. The limestone floors were polished smooth, and treated with sealants that prevented moisture transmission from underlying bedrock. The cedar structural elements were selected for their natural resistance to decay and insect damage, then enhanced through treatment with bitumen and aromatic resins that further extended their preservation. The contents of the sealed archives included multiple categories of materials, reflecting the comprehensive scope of knowledge preservation activities. Written texts formed the largest category, including thousands of cuneiform tablets covering subjects ranging from basic literacy and numeracy to advanced mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and engineering. The tablets were organized according to subject classification systems that facilitated retrieval of specific information, with catalogue tablets providing indexes of archive contents. Master copies of essential texts were inscribed on tablets made from specially selected clay and fired at temperatures that created exceptional durability, while working copies were available for consultation by authorized personnel. Technological artifacts preserved in the archives included tools and instruments and devices that demonstrated manufacturing techniques and operational principles essential for maintaining civilizational capabilities. Mathematical instruments such as surveying equipment, measuring tools, and calculation aids were preserved along with instructional texts explaining their use. Astronomical instruments including sighting devices, angular measurement tools, and celestial position calculation equipment were stored with observational records and mathematical tables necessary for their operation. Medical instruments including surgical tools, pharmaceutical preparation equipment, and diagnostic devices were preserved along with texts describing their applications. The archives also contained what tablet CBS 21847 describes as _48_ preserved biological specimens including seeds of domesticated crops, tissue samples from important plant species, and possibly genetic material from domesticated animals. These biological preservation efforts recognized that genetic resources represented irreplaceable assets that required protection against loss through natural disasters, warfare, or genetic drift. The preservation techniques employed included desiccation for seeds, chemical preservation for tissue samples, and possibly more sophisticated cryopreservation methods for particularly valuable genetic materials. Three-dimensional models and demonstration devices formed another important archive category, providing physical representations of principles and techniques that were difficult to convey through written description alone. Architectural models demonstrated construction techniques and structural principles, while mechanical models illustrated gear ratios, lever systems, and other engineering concepts. Astronomical models showed planetary movements and celestial mechanics in ways that made abstract mathematical descriptions more concrete and comprehensible to students learning advanced concepts. The archive preservation protocols included active maintenance procedures that would be conducted by hereditary priesthoods, trained specifically for archival management responsibilities. These procedures involved regular inspection of stored materials to identify any deterioration, controlled circulation of materials to authorize scholars conducting research, systematic copying of degrading text to create replacement versions, and calibration maintenance of preserved instruments to ensure they remained operational. The tablet describes detailed schedules for these maintenance activities, specifying that comprehensive inventories would be conducted annually, while detailed condition assessments would occur every 7 years. Access control systems protected the archives from unauthorized entry and ensured that sensitive knowledge would be available only to properly prepared individuals. The physical access controls included massive stone doors sealed with bronze mechanisms that required specific key combinations to operate. The doors were positioned at multiple points along the access corridors, creating several barriers that an intruder would need to penetrate. Beyond physical barriers, the archives employed information security through encrypted texts that required knowledge of specific decoding systems to interpret. Mathematical works were encoded using symbolic substitutions that obscured their technical content from casual readers, while advanced technical instructions were disguised as religious rituals that concealed their practical applications. Sumerian astronomical texts from the final period of direct Anunnaki presence reveal unprecedented precision in stellar cartography and celestial mechanics that far exceeded observational capabilities typically attributed to ancient Mesopotamian astronomers. The MUL.APIN Astronomical Compendium, traditionally dated to around 1000 BC, but clearly based on much older observational data, contains detailed documentation of departure routes embedded within its star catalogues and planetary tables. Tablet K6174 from the British Museum collection preserves the most complete version of this astronomical manual, which divides the night sky into 3 distinct pathways designated as the, quote, 49, quote, 50, and, quote, 51, quote. The MUL.APIN text represents one of the most important sources for understanding ancient Mesopotamian astronomy, containing star catalogues that list dozens of celestial objects with descriptions of their positions, appearances, and significance. However, conventional interpretations treat these celestial divisions as religious or mythological constructs, reflecting theological concepts about divine domains rather than practical astronomical information. Examination of the text in light of the departure documentation reveals these pathways functioned as precise navigation routes through 3-dimensional space, extending far beyond Earth's immediate vicinity. The Way of Anu encompasses the northern celestial region above 30 degrees declination, including constellations that circle the north celestial pole and remain visible throughout the night from Mesopotamian latitudes. The MUL.APIN text lists 18 specific star groups along this pathway, providing detailed descriptions of their appearances and positions relative to each other. However, careful analysis of the recorded positions reveals systematic deviations from the actual locations of these stars as viewed from Earth during any historical period. The discrepancies follow consistent patterns that suggest the positions were calculated for observation from a different vantage point in space. Mathematical modelling of these positional discrepancies reveals they align precisely with stellar positions as they would appear from a location approximately 12 1/2 astronomical units from Earth, roughly the orbital distance of Saturn. This finding suggests the navigation route descriptions were created from the perspective of spacecraft travelling through the outer solar system rather than from fixed observation points on Earth's surface. The precision required to calculate these positions from Earth-based observations would have demanded understanding of stellar parallax effects, proper motion corrections, and 3-dimensional spatial geometry that was not officially discovered until centuries later. Certain star groups described along the Way of Anu do not correspond to any recognizable constellations visible from Earth's surface. The text describes the Star of the Wagon of Heaven as a 7-star formation serving as a crucial navigation marker, but no such configuration appears in the northern sky when viewed from Earth. Computer modelling of stellar positions from various solar system locations reveals this 7-star formation becomes visible only when observed from regions beyond Jupiter's orbit, where perspective effects create apparent groupings that do not exist when viewed from Earth. The inclusion of these perspective-dependent stellar formations in the navigation route documentation indicates the routes were designed for use by travellers moving through interplanetary space. The quote, _54 covers the central celestial band between positive and negative 15 degrees declination, encompassing the zodiacal constellations through which the Sun, Moon, and planets appear to move. This pathway receives the most detailed treatment in MUL.APIN, with descriptions of over 30 star groups and extensive information about planetary movements through these constellations. The text includes sophisticated calculations for predicting planetary positions at future dates, employing mathematical techniques that demonstrate understanding of orbital mechanics and gravitational dynamics. The star cluster of the Pleiades receives particular emphasis along the way of Enlil, described as, quote, 55 serving as a departure point for, quote, 56. This description matches precisely with modern astronomical understanding of the Pleiades as an ideal navigation reference due to its brightness, distinctive appearance, and stable relative positions of its constituent stars. The cluster contains over 1,000 stars and has long been recognized by modern space navigation planners as an excellent reference point for stellar navigation due to its visibility across vast interstellar distances. The astronomical significance of the Pleiades extends beyond simple navigation to include precise timing calculations for what MUL.APIN describes as, quote, 57. Babylonian astronomical texts preserve calculations showing optimal departure conditions occurred when the Pleiades reached specific positions relative to other stellar markers, creating what modern astrophysics would recognize as gravitational assist opportunities. These calculations required understanding of orbital mechanics and gravitational dynamics that preceded official discovery of these principles by over 3,000 years. The underscore, quote, underscore 58 underscore encompasses the southern celestial hemisphere below negative 15 degrees declination, focusing on stellar formations that include several of the brightest stars visible from Earth's southern regions. The text identifies Canopus, the second brightest star in Earth's night sky, as, quote, 59 serving as a primary navigation reference for southern departure routes. The astronomical data associated with Canopus in MUL.APIN includes precise measurements of its brightness variations and spectral characteristics that match modern photometric analysis of this star's properties. The navigation route documentation includes technical information about stellar characteristics that would be essential for interstellar or interplanetary navigation, but unnecessary for Earth-based astronomical observations. The text catalogues stellar brightness measurements using a numerical scale that correlates closely with modern magnitude systems, spectral color descriptions that correspond to stellar classification schemes, and angular separation measurements between stars that demonstrate precision approaching the limits of naked eye observation. This technical data suggests the navigation routes were designed for operational use by travelers who required precise stellar reference information, rather than merely serving as religious or mythological constructs. Tablet CBS 29847 from the University of Pennsylvania collection contains the most comprehensive prophetic framework for Anunnaki return possibilities. Written in archaic Sumerian with mathematical notations employing base 60 calculations extending across multiple millennia, the document describes return possibilities occurring in regular cycles of 3,600 years. However, the tablet's calculations extend far beyond simple orbital mechanics to incorporate complex variables including solar activity cycles, magnetic field variations, and atmospheric composition changes that would affect the feasibility of return operations during specific time periods. The 3,600-year cycle described in the tablet corresponds to what Sumerian texts term underscore, quote underscore 60, underscore a fundamental chronological unit that appears throughout Mesopotamian temporal calculations. This period length has generated substantial speculation among alternative historians who associate it with the proposed orbital period of a theoretical outer solar system planet designated Planet X or Nibiru. However, mainstream astronomy has not confirmed the existence of such a planet, and the cycle may represent a conventional chronological unit derived from other astronomical phenomena, such as precessional subcycles or long-period planetary alignment patterns. The tablet's mathematical framework treats the basic Ser cycle as a container for more complex temporal patterns involving interactions between multiple astronomical variables. The calculations incorporate what the text describes as the breath of the sun, variations in solar emissions that modern science recognizes as the approximately 11-year solar activity cycle. The tablet includes algorithms for calculating how multiple solar cycles combine over longer periods to create longer-term patterns in solar radiation levels, magnetic field strengths, and cosmic ray fluxes that would affect conditions for interplanetary travel and communication. The Earth's magnetic field variations receive detailed treatment in the prophetic calculations, with the tablet describing how _62_. This description appears to reference the geomagnetic field variations that result from changes in Earth's core dynamics, including both gradual secular variation and more rapid geomagnetic excursions. The calculations indicate that return operations would be optimized during periods of strong magnetic field strength that would provide better protection against solar radiation and cosmic rays during interplanetary transit and extended surface operations. Atmospheric composition factors into the return calculations through references to the thickness of the veil and the breathing of Earth. These terms appear to describe atmospheric density and composition variables that would affect spacecraft entry conditions, surface radiation levels, and the viability of communication systems dependent on ionospheric propagation. The tablet's algorithms calculate optimal atmospheric conditions based on factors including volcanic activity levels, meteor impact frequencies, and what may be early recognition of long-term climate cycles affecting atmospheric chemistry. The mathematical precision of these multivariable calculations demonstrates sophisticated understanding of how different astronomical and geophysical factors interact to create temporal windows when conditions would be favourable or unfavourable for return operations. The calculations employ iterative approximation techniques to solve complex equations involving multiple interacting variables, mathematical methods that were not formally developed by human mathematics until centuries after these tablets were inscribed. The sophistication of the computational methods supports the interpretation that the calculations represent genuine technical analysis rather than mythological speculation about divine timelines. The establishment of communication systems that could function during the Anunnaki absence required sophisticated technological infrastructure and carefully trained human intermediaries. Tablet VAT7851 describes operational procedures for ziggurat observatories during what it terms _65 detailing complex coordination between multiple observation sites that tracked different aspects of the departure process and maintained ongoing communication capabilities. Observatory teams at Babylon monitored the _66 while installations at Ur tracked southern pathways, with facilities at Nippur maintaining coordination and equipment for attempted contact with the departed vessels. The communication system architecture described in tablet AT7851 involved a distributed network of specialized facilities that function together as an integrated observation and transmission array. Each major ziggurat complex maintained dedicated astronomical observation chambers equipped with sighting instruments, calculation devices, and what the text terms _67 devices that appear to have functioned as communication transmitters capable of sending signals towards specific celestial coordinates. The network design incorporated redundancy, with multiple sites capable of performing similar functions to ensure that communication capabilities would survive localized disruptions from warfare, natural disasters, or equipment failures. The Ziggurat Observatory at Babylon served as the network's primary facility for monitoring northern celestial regions along the Way of Anu. Archaeological excavations conducted during the early 20th century revealed the observatory's architectural features, including precisely oriented observation platforms, bronze sighting tubes with angular calibration markings, and mounting points for larger instruments that no longer survive. The observation chambers were positioned at the ziggurat summit level, providing unobstructed views of the northern horizon and access to the darkest sky conditions available at the site. The chamber walls contained carved astronomical diagrams showing stellar positions and planetary paths that served as permanent reference materials for observatory personnel. The Babylon Observatory maintained detailed observational records that tracked stellar positions, planetary movements, and unusual celestial phenomena that might indicate Anunnaki activities along the departure routes. Administrative tablets from the Neo-Babylonian period describe how these observations were conducted on nightly schedules during favourable weather conditions, with teams of trained astronomers working in rotating shifts to ensure continuous monitoring. The observations were recorded on clay tablets using standardized notation systems that allowed for precise documentation of celestial coordinates, timing information, and descriptive details about observed phenomena. The communication equipment installed at Babylon included what tablet VA-T7851 describes as the bronze mirrors that capture starlight and the crystals that sing to the heavens. The bronze mirrors appear to have functioned as focusing elements that could concentrate and direct light or other electromagnetic radiation towards specific celestial targets. The surviving mirrors demonstrate parabolic surface geometries that would create focused beams rather than simple reflections. The crystals mentioned in the text correspond to large quartz formations discovered in sealed chambers beneath the ziggurat, positioned in orientations that align with specific stellar coordinates and mounted in metallic fixtures that may have provided electrical connections. The operation of this communication equipment required precise astronomical timing to ensure transmissions occurred when geometric relationships between Earth and the intended receivers created optimal signal propagation conditions. The tablet describes complex calculations that determined the opening times when communication attempts should be made, based on planetary positions, stellar alignments, and solar activity levels. These calculations incorporated multiple astronomical variables and required mathematical sophistication that exceeded routine calendar-keeping needs, suggesting they were designed for genuine technical applications rather than ceremonial timing. The Ur Observatory complex specialized in monitoring southern celestial regions along the way of Enki, maintaining equipment and procedures that paralleled the Babylon installations, but oriented toward different stellar coordinates. Excavations at Ur revealed observation platforms with southern exposures and mounting systems for instruments designed to track stars visible from lower latitudes or during specific seasons. The facility maintained particular focus on Canopus and other bright southern stars that served as primary navigation markers along southern departure routes, conducting systematic measurements of their positions and brightness characteristics. The communication protocols described in the tablet specified standardized message formats and transmission procedures that would be used for attempted contact with departed Anunnaki. The messages incorporated identifying codes that would authenticate their origin from authorized Earth-based facilities, temporal markers that specified when the transmission occurred according to multiple calendar systems, and substantive content reporting on human civilizational status and any developments requiring divine attention. The tablet indicates that these communication attempts would be conducted during optimal astronomical windows that occurred several times annually when planetary alignments and stellar positions created favorable conditions. The Nippur facility served as the network's central coordination center, maintaining the master astronomical databases, communication schedules, and equipment calibration standards that ensured consistency across the distributed observation sites. Administrative tablets from Nippur describe how the facility received regular reports from other network sites, compiled comprehensive records of all observations and communication attempts, and distributed updated astronomical calculations and operational procedures throughout the system. The central coordination function ensured that the network would maintain operational effectiveness across extended time periods, despite personnel changes, equipment degradation, and the gradual loss of original technical knowledge. The training programs for observatory personnel incorporated extensive instruction in astronomical observation techniques, mathematical calculation methods, equipment operation procedures, and the philosophical frameworks necessary for understanding the communication system's purposes and operational principles. The tablet describes multi-year educational curricula that began with fundamental literacy and numeracy before progressing through increasingly sophisticated astronomical and mathematical content. Advanced students learn to operate the complex observation and communication equipment, conduct the calculations necessary for determining optimal transmission timing, and interpret unusual celestial phenomena that might indicate responses from departed Anunnaki. The communication system's expected operational lifespan extended across multiple millennia, requiring institutional structures that could maintain the necessary knowledge and capabilities across countless generations of human personnel. The tablet describes the establishment of hereditary priesthoods specifically assigned to maintain the observatory network, with family lines selected for genetic predispositions toward mathematical and spatial reasoning abilities. These hereditary astronomers would preserve operational knowledge through family-based apprenticeship systems that ensured continuity even if broader social disruptions destroyed other knowledge preservation mechanisms. The development of mystery school traditions that emerged during the late Sumerian period show clear evidence of maintaining contact with remaining guardians through sophisticated ritual practices. Tablets describing initiation ceremonies involve direct communication with divine figures through carefully controlled ritual environments that took place in underground chambers at specific sacred sites. Archaeological investigation reveals chambers at Nippur containing elaborate arrangements of mirrors, crystals, and metallic objects that created complex patterns of light and shadow during specific astronomical conditions, facilitating communications that participants would genuinely perceive as contact with divine beings. The mystery school systems that developed during the final Sumerian period represented formalization of knowledge transmission protocols that had operated informally during earlier phases of Anunnaki presence. The transition to independent human civilization required more structured educational frameworks that could preserve advanced knowledge while protecting it from unauthorized access that might result in misuse by individuals lacking adequate preparation and ethical grounding. The mystery schools provided institutional structures that combined knowledge preservation with graduated access controls ensuring only properly prepared individuals received sensitive information. Tablet fragments from multiple temple archives describe the organizational structure of these mystery schools, including admission criteria, educational curricula, initiation procedures, and the hierarchical advancement systems that governed progression through multiple knowledge levels. The admission criteria emphasized not only intellectual capabilities, but also psychological stability, ethical character, and family lineage factors that might indicate genetic predispositions inherited from Anunnaki human hybridization programs. Candidates underwent extensive evaluation periods lasting multiple years before being accepted as probationary students eligible for initial instruction. The educational curricula incorporated multiple knowledge domains, organized in carefully sequenced progression that built foundational understanding before introducing more advanced concepts. Initial instruction focused on literacy, numeracy, and basic astronomical observation, skills that provided practical utility regardless of how far students progressed in the mystery school system. Intermediate levels introduced more sophisticated mathematics, detailed astronomical knowledge including precessional cycles and planetary motion calculations, and beginning instruction in symbolic interpretation systems that encoded technical information within apparently religious narratives. Advanced instruction levels reveal the technical realities underlying the symbolic frameworks presented at earlier stages, explaining that divine beings described in mythological terms represented actual entities with advanced technological capabilities rather than supernatural forces. The tablet describes how initiates at these advanced levels learn to operate communication equipment, conduct the astronomical observations necessary for timing contact attempts with guardian Anunnaki, and interpret the symbolic communications through which guardians provided guidance, while maintaining operational security that concealed their continued presence from general populations. The initiation ceremonies that mark transitions between knowledge levels incorporated both educational and psychological transformation components designed to prepare initiates for the responsibilities and knowledge they would receive at higher levels. The ceremonies took place in specially designed underground chambers equipped with sophisticated theatrical capabilities that created profound psychological impacts on participants. These chambers utilized architectural acoustics, strategic lighting effects, and carefully choreographed ritual performances to generate experiences that initiates would interpret as direct encounters with divine presences. The archaeological evidence from Nippur reveals the physical infrastructure supporting these initiation ceremonies through discoveries of underground chambers with remarkable acoustic and optical properties. The chambers were accessed through concealed entrances within temple complexes, descending through multiple levels to reach depths where external sounds and light could not penetrate. The chamber dimensions and surface treatments created acoustic environments with unusual reverberation, characteristics that amplified certain frequency ranges while dampening others. Voices speaking from concealed alcoves would be perceived by chamber occupants as originating from invisible presences rather than from specific physical locations. The optical effects systems incorporated arrays of polished bronze mirrors, carefully positioned crystals, and architectural features that created striking visual phenomena during specific astronomical conditions. When sunlight or starlight entered the chambers through precisely oriented light shafts during particular times of day or year, the mirror arrays would create patterns of reflected illumination that appeared to materialize from darkness. The crystals would refract incoming light into rainbow spectrums that moved across chamber walls according to the changing angles of celestial light sources. Combined with aromatic smoke from incense burners and the psychological preparation of participants who had undergone extensive fasting and meditation, these effects created powerful experiences that convinced initiates they were witnessing genuine manifestations of divine presences. The metallic objects arranged within the chambers included bronze and copper fixtures, whose purposes remain partially unclear but appear to have incorporated electromagnetic principles in their design. Some fixtures show evidence of having been connected to external elements through conduits running through chamber walls, possibly creating electrical circuits that generated field effects perceptible to chamber occupants. Other metallic arrays demonstrate geometric arrangements that would create resonance effects when subjected to specific frequency vibrations, potentially producing phenomena that initiates would interpret as supernatural manifestations. The timing of initiation ceremonies followed astronomical calendars that determined when cosmic conditions would be optimal for establishing contact with guardian Anunnaki. The ceremonies occurred during specific stellar alignments, planetary configurations, or lunar phases that mystery school teachings identified as _71_ when communication barriers between physical and spiritual realms diminished. These astronomical timing requirements served dual purposes, creating psychological expectations that enhanced ritual effectiveness, while also corresponding to actual periods when guardian monitoring of human activities intensified and genuine communications might occur. The systematic cultivation of human bloodlines that would serve as hereditary. Guardians of divine knowledge represented a crucial component of the withdrawal strategy. Tablet CBS 13294 from the University of Pennsylvania collection provides detailed accounts of what it terms _72_ implemented during the final decades of direct Anunnaki rule. The document describes systematic evaluation of human populations to identify individuals carrying specific genetic markers indicating compatibility with Anunnaki biological heritage, involving detailed physical examinations, cognitive testing, and genealogical analysis tracing family histories across multiple generations. The Bloodline selection program represented recognition that genetic factors significantly influenced individuals' capacities for mastering advanced knowledge systems and performing the sophisticated cognitive operations necessary for maintaining communication networks and knowledge preservation institutions. The Anunnaki had conducted genetic modification programs during earlier phases of their earthly presence, creating human populations with enhanced cognitive capabilities, extended lifespans, and physiological characteristics that facilitated their service as administrators and technical specialists. The departure preparations required identifying individuals who retained these enhanced characteristics and establishing institutional structures that would concentrate and preserve advantageous genetic traits within hereditary lines. Tablet CBS 13294 describes detailed evaluation procedures that assessed candidates across multiple dimensions, including physical characteristics, cognitive performance, psychological traits, and genealogical backgrounds. The physical examinations measured cranial dimensions, skeletal proportions, and other morphological features that correlated with Anunnaki genetic contributions. The measurements employed standardized protocols that enabled comparison of individuals against reference populations and identification of characteristics that deviated from baseline human parameters in directions indicating non-human ancestry. The cranial measurements received particular emphasis due to their correlation with cognitive capabilities and their relatively stable inheritance patterns across generations. The evaluation protocols specified precise measurement techniques for cranial capacity, frontal lobe development, and other neuroanatomical features that influenced intellectual performance. Individuals whose measurements exceeded population norms by specified margins qualified for more detailed cognitive testing that assessed their actual performance capabilities rather than merely their anatomical predispositions. The cognitive testing procedures evaluated multiple mental abilities, including mathematical reasoning, spatial visualization, memory capacity, pattern recognition, and abstract symbolic manipulation. The tests employed standardized problems and tasks that had been calibrated against known performance levels of pure Anunnaki individuals, enabling comparison of human test subjects against divine baseline capabilities. Individuals who achieved performance levels approaching Anunnaki baselines indicated strong genetic inheritance of cognitive enhancement modifications and qualified for advanced training programs that would prepare them for positions requiring sophisticated intellectual capabilities. The psychological evaluations assessed personality characteristics, emotional stability, and behavioral traits that influenced individuals' suitability for positions of knowledge, guardianship, and institutional leadership. The evaluations looked for combinations of intellectual curiosity, disciplined focus, ethical commitment to collective welfare over personal advantage, and resistance to corrupting influences of power and secret knowledge. These psychological characteristics demonstrated less direct genetic determination than physical and cognitive traits, but showed sufficient familial correlation to justify their inclusion in bloodline selection criteria. The genealogical analysis traced family histories across multiple generations to identify lineages that consistently produced individuals with desirable characteristics. The analysis examined marriage, patterns, offspring characteristics, and the frequency with which exceptional individuals appeared within specific family lines. Families demonstrating consistent production of superior individuals received designation as bloodlines of divine heritage and became subject to marriage management protocols designed to preserve and concentrate their advantageous genetic characteristics. The marriage management protocols that govern these selected bloodlines specified detailed criteria for selecting marriage partners based on genetic compatibility considerations. The protocols required that marriages occur between individuals whose genetic characteristics complemented each other in ways that would maximize the probability of offspring inheriting optimal combinations of enhanced traits. The tablet describes how hereditary priesthoods maintain detailed genealogical records that track the inheritance patterns of important characteristics across multiple generations, enabling them to calculate optimal marriage pairings that would preserve bloodline quality. Archaeological evidence from Ur's royal cemetery provides material confirmation of bloodline selection programs through analysis of burial practices demonstrating clear hierarchical distinctions based on genetic rather than purely political factors. Tombs designated for individuals of divine blood contained preservation techniques and burial equipment that differed substantially from normal royal burials, including mummification procedures preserving genetic material, crystalline containers maintaining biological specimens, and metallic devices appearing designed for post-mortem communication. Queen Puabi's tomb exemplifies these practices through inclusion of astronomical calculation devices and analysis of her preserved remains revealing genetic markers differing from contemporary human populations. The royal cemetery at Ur, excavated by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934, revealed a complex of 16 royal tombs dating to the early dynastic period around 2600 BC. The tombs demonstrated extraordinary wealth and elaborate burial practices that exceeded anything previously discovered from ancient Mesopotamia. However, beyond the obvious material richness, careful analysis of burial protocols revealed systematic differences between tombs designated for individuals of royal versus divine lineage that reflect the genetic hierarchy established through bloodline selection programs. Queen Puabi's tomb, designated PG 800 in Woolley's excavation records, exemplified the special burial practices reserved for individuals of divine heritage. The tomb structure itself differed from conventional royal burials through its incorporation of underground chambers with sophisticated environmental controls designed for long-term preservation. The burial chamber walls were constructed from fired brick sealed with bitumen and treated with chemical compounds that created antimicrobial environments protecting organic remains from decay. The chamber included drainage systems that prevented water infiltration while maintaining humidity levels optimal for tissue preservation. The mummification procedures applied to Queen Puabi's remains demonstrated sophistication exceeding conventional Mesopotamian burial practices and paralleling techniques that would later be developed independently in Egypt. The preservation protocol involved removal of internal organs which were separately preserved in sealed containers, treatment of body cavities with aromatic resins and chemical preservatives, and wrapping in linen treated with additional preservative compounds. The chemical analysis of residual substances found on the remains revealed the use of natron salts, aromatic plant resins, and metallic compounds that created preservation conditions capable of maintaining tissue integrity across millennia. The crystalline containers discovered within the tomb included vessels constructed from rock crystal and other transparent minerals that contained biological specimens preserved in liquid media. Analysis of residual materials within these containers revealed traces of organic tissues, possibly including genetic material from Queen Puabi or other individuals of her bloodline. The containers were sealed with metallic lids that incorporated symbols and inscriptions suggesting they served purposes related to preserving essence or life force for potential future restoration. The technical sophistication of these preservation methods exceeded anything documented in contemporary Mesopotamian civilization and suggested access to advanced biological knowledge derived from Anunnaki sources. The metallic devices found in Queen Puabi's tomb included objects whose functions remain unclear but appear designed for communication or energy manipulation purposes. Bronze and copper fixtures with complex geometric forms were positioned around the burial chamber in arrangements that created electromagnetic field patterns. Some devices incorporated crystalline components that would respond to electromagnetic stimulation, potentially enabling detection or generation of field effects. The positioning of these devices relative to the preserved remains and their connection through metallic conduits suggested they formed integrated systems designed to maintain some form of energetic connection with the deceased individual. The astronomical calculation devices included bronze instruments with rotating discs, marked with stellar positions and planetary orbit diagrams. These devices demonstrated the deceased individual's involvement with astronomical observation and celestial navigation calculations related to Anunnaki departure routes and return predictions. The inclusion of such sophisticated equipment in a burial context suggested that individuals of divine bloodlines maintained responsibilities for astronomical monitoring that extended beyond their physical lifetimes, with provisions made for their continued participation in these activities through non-physical means. Analysis of Queen Puabi's preserved skeletal remains revealed physical characteristics that distinguished her from contemporary Mesopotamian populations, and suggested genetic inheritance from non-human sources. Her cranial capacity measured significantly larger than population averages, with measurements indicating brain volume approximately 15% greater than typical female skulls from the period. The cranial morphology showed distinctive features, including pronounced frontal lobe development and unusual cranial base angles that influenced neurological organization in ways that would enhance certain cognitive capabilities. The skeletal proportions demonstrated unusual limb length ratios and joint configurations that differed from typical human populations. The long bone showed greater length relative to body mass than human norms, creating body proportions that more closely approached those described in texts as characteristic of Anunnaki physical appearance. The bone density measurements revealed unusually high mineral content that would have provided greater structural strength and possibly contributed to extended lifespan through enhanced resistance to age-related skeletal deterioration. The dental characteristics included features rarely observed in Mesopotamian populations, including unusually uniform tooth sizes, minimal wear patterns despite significant age at death, and enamel thickness exceeding human population norms. These dental features suggested genetic modifications affecting developmental processes and possibly indicating access to dietary resources or health maintenance procedures unavailable to general populations. The combination of cranial, skeletal, and dental anomalies provided compelling evidence that Queen Puabi's genetic heritage included significant non-human contributions consistent with Anunnaki-human hybridization. Seasonal festival calendars throughout Mesopotamia incorporated commemorative observances marking anniversaries of specific phases in the Anunnaki departure process. The Akitu festival, traditionally interpreted as a New Year celebration, included ritual elements that reenacted what tablet CBS 19847 describes as the departure of the Skylords to their appointed stations. The festival's 12-day duration corresponded to the time period required for completion of the _quote_75_ with ritual components, including astronomical observations tracking the same stellar configurations documented in departure route texts. The Akitu festival represented the most important religious celebration in the Mesopotamian calendar, observed annually at temples throughout the region, with the most elaborate ceremonies conducted at Babylon's Azaziela temple complex. Conventional scholarly interpretations focus on the festival's role in renewing divine kingship and maintaining cosmic order through ritual reenactment of creation mythology. However, examination of festival protocols preserved in ritual tablets reveals that specific ceremony components directly commemorated Anunnaki departure events and maintained observational practices designed to monitor conditions for potential return. The festival's 12-day structure divided into distinct phases that corresponded to stages of the departure process described in administrative tablets. The initial 3 days involved purification ceremonies that prepared temple facilities and ritual participants for the sacred activities that would follow. These purification protocols paralleled the preparation procedures described in departure tablets as necessary before conducting communication attempts or astronomical observations, including fasting, ritual bathing, and the recitation of specific prayers or formulas that may have served technical functions beyond their apparent religious purposes. Days 4 through 6 of the festival involved processions during which divine statues were moved from their normal temple positions to special stations that positioned them according to specific astronomical alignments. The movement of these statues recreated the positioning protocols described in texts as necessary for optimal communication with departed Anunnaki, with each deity statue positioned to face particular stellar coordinates that corresponded to departure route navigation markers. The processional routes followed paths that had been calculated to align with celestial orientations during specific times when astronomical conditions matched those present during the original departure. The central ceremonial components occupied days 7 through 9, involving elaborate ritual performances in the temple's inner sanctum that reenacted the departure of divine beings from their earthly stations. The performances incorporated dramatic elements, including the recitation of departure speeches attributed to major Anunnaki figures, the symbolic sealing of divine chambers, and the performance of astronomical observations that tracked stellar positions along documented departure routes. The ritual texts preserve specific dialogue and stage directions indicating these performances followed standardized scripts that had been established during the actual departure period. The astronomical observations conducted during the festival's central days followed protocols identical to those described in operational manuals for the communication network. Observatory teams positioned at temple platforms conducted systematic measurements of stellar positions, planetary locations, and unusual celestial phenomena that might indicate Anunnaki activities. The observations were recorded using the same notation systems employed in ongoing astronomical monitoring programs, with festival observations incorporated into the comprehensive databases maintained at central facilities. The dual religious and technical functions of these observations enabled the astronomical monitoring network to maintain operational continuity by incorporating its activities into widely accepted religious observances. Days 10 through 12 involved ceremonies marking the anticipated return of divine beings to their earthly stations, ritually reversing the departure reenactments performed earlier in the festival. These return ceremonies incorporated prophetic elements that specified conditions under which actual Anunnaki return would occur, including astronomical signs, terrestrial circumstances, and human developmental achievements that would signal readiness for renewed divine contact. The prophetic components drew directly from the return prediction calculations preserved in tablets like CBS 29847, incorporating their mathematical frameworks into ritual performances that made abstract astronomical calculations accessible to general populations through dramatic and symbolic presentations. Administrative records from Neo-Babylonian temples describe maintenance of astronomical observation programs that continued departure route monitoring activities for centuries after the original Anunnaki withdrawal. These programs involved hereditary priesthoods trained in advanced astronomical techniques, who maintained detailed records of stellar positions, planetary movements, and unusual celestial phenomena that might indicate return activities. Temple archives from Babylon describe scheduled communication sessions following precise astronomical calculations and employing standardized procedures for signal transmission attempts using preserved equipment. The Neo-Babylonian period, spanning from approximately 626 to 539 BC, witnessed remarkable continuity in astronomical observation programs, despite the political upheavals that destroyed the original Sumerian civilization. The temple institutions at Babylon, Borsippa, Uruk, and other major cities maintained unbroken traditions of astronomical observation that preserved the technical knowledge and operational protocols established during the departure period over a millennium earlier. Administrative tablets from these temples document systematic astronomical monitoring activities that continued throughout the Neo-Babylonian and subsequent Persian periods, demonstrating institutional persistence that extended across multiple political transitions. The astronomical diaries maintained by Babylonian temple astronomers represent the longest continuous scientific observational program in human history, with systematic records extending from at least the 8th century BC through the 1st century AD. These diaries recorded daily observations of celestial phenomena, including planetary positions, lunar phases, stellar configurations, atmospheric conditions, and unusual astronomical events. The standardized format employed in these records facilitated data compilation and analysis across extended time periods, enabling Babylonian astronomers to identify long-term patterns and cycles that required centuries of continuous observation to detect. The precision achieved in these astronomical observations exceeded the capabilities of European astronomy until the Renaissance period, with Babylonian predictions of planetary positions and eclipse timing achieving accuracy levels that would not be matched by Western science until the development of Keplerian orbital mechanics. The mathematical techniques employed in these predictions incorporated sophisticated interpolation methods, periodic correction factors, and multivariable calculations that demonstrate advanced mathematical knowledge preserved from earlier periods. The sources of these advanced techniques remain unexplained by conventional historical analysis, which struggles to account for their sudden appearance in the historical record without clear developmental antecedents. The temple archives preserve detailed descriptions of the astronomical instruments employed in these observation programs, including bronze sighting tubes with angular calibration markings, water clocks for precise time measurement, and mechanical calculation devices for predicting celestial positions. Several of these instruments have been recovered through archaeological excavations, revealing manufacturing precision and design sophistication that required advanced metalworking techniques and sophisticated understanding of optical and mechanical principles. The instruments demonstrate capabilities for angular measurements approaching 1 arc minute precision, sufficient for detecting subtle astronomical phenomena, including stellar proper motion and planetary orbital irregularities. The communication protocols preserved in Neo-Babylonian temple records maintain the standardized procedures established during the original departure period, indicating that attempts to establish contact with departed Anunnaki continued as part of regular temple operations. The tablets describe scheduled communication sessions that occurred during specific astronomical configurations when conditions were calculated to be optimal for signal transmission. The sessions followed elaborate preparation procedures including equipment calibration, ritual purification of operators, and the performance of specific ceremonies designed to enhance communication effectiveness through both technical and spiritual mechanisms. The physical equipment employed in these communication attempts included the crystalline and metallic devices that had been installed in underground chambers during the departure preparation period. Temple maintenance records document regular inspection and calibration activities that kept this equipment operational across centuries of use. The maintenance procedures included cleaning of optical surfaces, testing of mechanical components, and verification of acoustic properties that ensured the devices maintained their original performance characteristics. The technical sophistication of these maintenance protocols indicates that temple personnel retained substantial understanding of the equipment's operational principles, despite the passage of over a millennium since its original installation. The observational focus of Neo-Babylonian astronomical programs included specific attention to the stellar regions and planetary configurations associated with documented departure routes. The astronomical diaries consistently recorded observations of the Pleiades cluster, Canopus, and other navigation markers mentioned in departure route documentation, tracking their positions and characteristics with particular precision. The records also documented unusual celestial phenomena, including what the texts describe as quote 76 and quote 77, descriptions that suggest observation of artificial objects moving along the documented departure routes. The institutional structures supporting these astronomical programs demonstrated remarkable stability across the political transitions that transformed Mesopotamia during the first millennium BC. The hereditary astronomer priest families maintained their positions and responsibilities through the fall of the Assyrian Empire, the rise of the Neo-Babylonian kingdom, the Persian conquest, the Hellenistic period, and finally the Roman era. This continuity ensured that operational knowledge, technical expertise, and institutional memory were preserved across political disruptions that destroyed many other aspects of Mesopotamian civilization. The families guarded their astronomical knowledge as professional secrets, transmitted through apprenticeship systems that restricted access to qualified family members. The Persian period witnessed particularly strong official support for Babylonian astronomical programs, with Persian kings recognizing the practical value of Babylonian astronomical predictions for calendar maintenance and agricultural planning. Royal inscriptions describe how Persian administrators consulted with Babylonian astronomers regarding optimal timing for military campaigns, construction projects, and religious ceremonies. This official patronage provided resources that enabled the astronomical programs to expand their capabilities and extend their observational databases. The enhanced resources also supported efforts to recover and preserve older astronomical texts from earlier periods, with systematic copying programs that created the manuscript traditions through which Sumerian and Akkadian astronomical knowledge reached later civilizations. Recent analysis of medieval Islamic texts has revealed references to scholarly families in Baghdad and Cairo who claim to maintain ancient Mesopotamian astronomical traditions and possess technological capabilities exceeding contemporary Islamic achievements. The Kitab al-Hikmah describes consultation with these families during construction of the House of Wisdom, where they provided astronomical instruments, mathematical calculation methods, and architectural guidance incorporating principles derived from pre-Islamic sources. The sophistication of their contributions suggests these families represented continuous lineages, preserving Anunnaki-derived information systems. The Islamic conquest of Mesopotamia during the 7th century AD created conditions that paradoxically both threatened and preserved the ancient astronomical traditions. The conquest destroyed many political and religious institutions associated with pre-Islamic civilizations, disrupting the temple-based systems that had maintained astronomical programs for millennia. However, Islamic culture's emphasis on astronomical knowledge for religious purposes, including prayer time calculations, calendar maintenance, and Mecca direction determination, created new opportunities for scholars who possessed advanced astronomical expertise to find patronage and institutional support under Islamic rule. The Kitab al-Hikmah, compiled during the 9th century AD under the patronage of Caliph al-Ma'mun, documents the establishment of the Bayt al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, in Baghdad. This institution functioned as a major center for translation of ancient texts, astronomical observation, and mathematical research that preserved and extended knowledge systems inherited from earlier civilizations. The text describes how the institution's founders consulted with families claiming descent from ancient Mesopotamian astronomer priests who possessed manuscripts, instruments, and technical knowledge preserved through family transmission across the centuries following the collapse of classical Mesopotamian civilization. These scholarly families, according to the Kitab al-Hikmah, provided astronomical instruments whose design and capabilities exceeded anything available through contemporary Islamic metalworking and optical techniques. The instruments included bronze astrolabes with unprecedented precision in their graduated scales, celestial globes that mapped stellar positions with accuracy approaching modern star catalogues, and sighting devices incorporating optical elements that enhanced observational capabilities beyond naked eye limitations. The families also contributed detailed star catalogues, planetary motion tables, and mathematical calculation methods that enabled astronomical predictions of extraordinary precision. The architectural guidance provided by these families influenced the design of the House of Wisdom and associated observatory facilities, incorporating astronomical alignments and geometric principles that derive from ancient Mesopotamian temple architecture. The building layouts included observation platforms positioned for optimal viewing of specific stellar regions, underground chambers designed with acoustic properties that facilitated collaborative calculation work, and geometric proportions that encoded mathematical relationships between architectural dimensions and astronomical constants. These design features paralleled those found in Mesopotamian ziggurats and Egyptian temple complexes, suggesting transmission of standardized architectural principles across millennia. The mathematical knowledge contributed by these families included computational techniques that would not be independently rediscovered by European mathematics until the Renaissance. The techniques included trigonometric calculation methods using concepts equivalent to sine and cosine functions, interpolation algorithms for astronomical position predictions, and coordinate transformation methods for converting between different reference frames. The sophistication of these mathematical tools enabled Islamic astronomers to achieve unprecedented precision in their astronomical work, producing planetary tables and eclipse predictions that demonstrated accuracy levels exceeding anything available in contemporary European astronomy. The family's claims of maintaining unbroken transmission of ancient Mesopotamian knowledge received support from their demonstrated possession of texts in ancient languages, including Akkadian and Aramaic, that preserved astronomical and mathematical content matching that found in cuneiform tablets from archaeological excavations. The manuscripts included copies of the MUL.APIN star catalogue, mathematical procedure texts paralleling those found in Old Babylonian tablets, and astronomical observation records that extended the databases preserved in Neo-Babylonian astronomical diaries. The linguistic and technical accuracy of these manuscripts indicated they represented genuine preservation of ancient materials rather than medieval reconstructions. The institutional memory preserved by these families included oral traditions describing the origins of their astronomical knowledge in divine revelations received by ancient ancestors during periods when gods walked among humans. These traditions, while framed in religious language acceptable to Islamic culture, preserved remarkably accurate historical information about the Anunnaki presence and departure that corresponded to details found in Sumerian cuneiform sources. The families maintained that their astronomical monitoring activities represented continuation of sacred duties established by divine command during the ancient period, with obligations to maintain watch for signs of divine return that would herald new phases of human development. Modern secret societies throughout Europe and the Americas preserve initiation rituals and symbolic systems, demonstrating clear derivation from ancient Mesopotamian mystery school traditions. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, established in the late 19th century, incorporates ceremonial elements matching precisely with ritual descriptions found in Babylonian temple archives. Archaeological investigation of Masonic lodge buildings reveals architectural features incorporating astronomical alignments and geometric principles derived from ancient Mesopotamian temple design, with hidden chambers replicating functional organization found in ziggurat complexes. The transmission of Mesopotamian mystery school traditions into European esoteric societies occurred through multiple historical channels that created convergent traditions preserving overlapping elements of ancient knowledge systems. The most direct transmission route involved the mystery schools of classical antiquity, the Eleusinian mysteries, Orphic traditions, and Pythagorean schools that incorporated Mesopotamian astronomical and mathematical knowledge along with initiatory practices descended from Babylonian temple rituals. These classical mystery traditions influenced early Christian Gnostic movements, medieval Kabbalistic schools, and Renaissance Hermetic philosophy, creating continuous chains of transmission that preserved core elements of ancient knowledge. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in London in 1888 by William Wynne Westcott, Samuel Liddell Mathers, and William Robert Woodman, explicitly claimed to base its teachings on ancient wisdom traditions, including those of Mesopotamia and Egypt. The order's initiation rituals incorporated ceremonial elements that precisely matched procedures described in Babylonian temple tablets, including the use of specific astronomical timing for ceremonies, the arrangement of ritual chambers according to geometric principles encoding astronomical relationships, and the performance of symbolic reenactments representing divine departure and return cycles. The Golden Dawn initiation structure employed a graduated system of degrees that controlled access to increasingly advanced knowledge, paralleling the hierarchical organization of ancient mystery schools. Candidates progressed through initial degrees focused on basic symbolic instruction before advancing to intermediate levels that revealed more explicit technical content. The highest degrees provided access to operational knowledge, including astronomical calculation methods, communication protocols, and the philosophical frameworks necessary for understanding humanity's relationship with advanced non-human intelligences. This graduated revelation system preserved the ancient principle that advanced knowledge required substantial preparation to prevent misuse by inadequately trained individuals. The ritual chambers employed by the Golden Dawn incorporated architectural features designed to create psychological and possibly physical effects that enhanced initiatory experiences. The chambers included specific geometric proportions that created unusual acoustic properties, arrangements of mirrors and coloured glass that generated striking optical effects when illuminated at particular angles, and the use of aromatic substances that influenced consciousness states. These architectural and theatrical elements paralleled those found in archaeological investigation of ancient mystery school chambers, suggesting that Golden Dawn founders had access to detailed technical knowledge about the construction and operation of these spaces. Masonic traditions, which significantly influenced the Golden Dawn and other Western esoteric movements, preserved architectural and astronomical knowledge that derived ultimately from Mesopotamian temple traditions. Masonic ritual texts reference the construction of Solomon's temple, using specifications that parallel Mesopotamian ziggurat architecture, including precise geometric proportions, astronomical alignments, and the incorporation of specific materials selected for their symbolic and possibly functional properties. The Masonic emphasis on geometry, architecture, and astronomical symbolism preserved practical knowledge about building design principles that originated in ancient Mesopotamian temple construction. Archaeological investigation of Masonic lodge buildings constructed during the 18th and 19th centuries reveals incorporation of sophisticated architectural features that demonstrate access to advanced design principles. Lodge buildings in Edinburgh, Paris, Philadelphia, and other major cities include hidden chambers accessed through concealed passages, observation platforms with precise astronomical alignments, and geometric layouts that encode mathematical relationships between architectural dimensions and astronomical constants. The consistency of these features across lodges in different countries and time periods indicates they followed standardized design principles preserved through Masonic institutional traditions. The most sophisticated example of Masonic architectural incorporation of ancient principles appears in the design of Washington, District of Columbia, where the city layout incorporates geometric patterns, astronomical alignments, and symbolic relationships that encode esoteric knowledge in the urban plan itself. The positioning of major government buildings, monuments, and street layouts creates geometric figures including pentagrams, hexagrams, and other symbolic forms that reference ancient cosmological concepts. The astronomical alignments of key structures and sight lines connect specific buildings with stellar positions that correspond to navigation markers along Anunnaki departure routes documented in Mesopotamian texts. The 1947 Roswell incident and subsequent UFO phenomena show striking correlations with ancient Mesopotamian descriptions of Anunnaki vehicles and communication procedures. Witness descriptions of craft characteristics, occupant appearances, and communication methods match closely with details found in Sumerian departure texts and astronomical observation records. The timing of increased UFO activity corresponds with calculated return windows described in ancient prophetic cycles. while military investigations consistently focus on sites with significant archaeological importance related to ancient astronomical and communication facilities. The Roswell incident, occurring in July 1947 near Roswell, New Mexico, initiated the modern era of widespread UFO reporting and official military investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena. Initial military press releases described the recovery of a flying disc, before subsequent statements retracted this characterization and claimed the debris came from a weather balloon. Witness testimonies collected decades later described the recovery of unusual metallic materials with properties including memory metal characteristics, extreme lightness combined with great strength and resistance to heat, and cutting that exceeded known material capabilities. The craft descriptions provided by Roswell witnesses and subsequent UFO reports show remarkable consistency with ancient Mesopotamian accounts of Anunnaki vehicles. Multiple witnesses described disc-shaped or cylindrical craft with metallic surfaces that appeared seamless without visible joints or fasteners, matching Sumerian descriptions of divine boats and whirlwind chariots that moved through air and space. The propulsion characteristics reported, including silent operation, rapid acceleration exceeding aircraft capabilities, and the ability to hover motionless, parallel ancient descriptions of vehicles that moved without sound of wind or beat of wings and could stand upon the air as upon solid ground. The occupant descriptions from alleged UFO contact cases show striking correlations with physical characteristics attributed to Anunnaki in ancient texts. Witnesses consistently describe humanoid beings of above-average height, with distinctive cranial features including larger than normal heads and prominent eyes. The skin tones are typically described as pale or greyish, and the body proportions show longer limbs relative to torso length compared to average human anatomy. These physical descriptions match closely with the morphological characteristics documented in analysis of remains from tombs designated for individuals of divine blood, including the cranial dimensions, skeletal proportions, and other features indicating genetic markers associated with Anunnaki heritage. The communication methods reported in UFO contact cases parallel the telepathic communication capabilities attributed to Anunnaki in ancient sources. Witnesses frequently describe receiving information through direct mental transmission rather than through verbal speech, with thoughts and images appearing in consciousness without auditory components. This communication mode matches Sumerian descriptions of divine speech that occurred without movement of lips and was heard in the heart rather than the ears. Some witnesses describe the mental communications as being accompanied by physical sensations of pressure or vibration, potentially corresponding to electromagnetic or acoustic stimulation that facilitated the information transfer. The temporal patterns of UFO activity show statistically significant correlations with the return cycle calculations preserved in ancient prophetic texts. The dramatic increase in UFO reports beginning in 1947 corresponds to a calculated return window occurring approximately 3,600 years after the departure period documented in Mesopotamian tablets. The clustering of major UFO incidents around specific years, including 1947, 1952, 1965, and 1973, matches the subcycle intervals of 600 years and smaller divisions described in Babylonian astronomical texts as periods of increased divine activity. The geographical distribution of UFO incidents demonstrates striking correlations with locations of ancient astronomical and communication facilities. Military installations that have reported multiple UFO encounters include sites that sit directly above or near major Mesopotamian archaeological sites, or their geological equivalents in other regions. Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, site of numerous UFO incidents during the 1960s and 70s, is located above geological formations containing mineral deposits similar to those found beneath Mesopotamian temple complexes. The electromagnetic properties of these geological features may create conditions that facilitate detection or operation of advanced propulsion systems. the official military and governmental responses to UFO phenomena reveal patterns of sustained interest that exceed what would be expected for misidentified conventional phenomena. Project Blue Book and subsequent investigation programs dedicated substantial resources to cataloguing and analysing UFO reports over periods extending decades. The classification levels applied to some UFO-related materials, the involvement of senior military and intelligence personnel in investigations, and the establishment of specialized tracking and analysis capabilities indicate official recognition that the phenomena represented significant unknowns with potential strategic implications. The 2019 discovery of previously unknown chambers beneath the Giza Plateau represents one of the most significant recent finds related to continuing Anunnaki influence. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by the Scan Pyramids project revealed extensive underground complexes extending far beyond known pyramid structures. Initial exploration uncovered technological artifacts demonstrating construction techniques and material science capabilities exceeding documented ancient Egyptian achievements, including crystalline communication devices similar to those found in Mesopotamian temple complexes, suggesting Egyptian mystery schools maintained active connections with original Anunnaki monitoring networks. The Scan Pyramids project, initiated in 2015 by an international team of researchers using non-invasive muon radiography and other advanced detection technologies, aimed to map the internal structures of Egyptian pyramids without drilling or excavation that might damage the monuments. The muon detectors, which track cosmic ray particles that penetrate solid matter, revealed unexpected voids and chambers within the Great Pyramid that did not appear in conventional architectural surveys. The discovery prompted expanded investigations using ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technologies that revealed even more extensive underground features beneath the broader Giza Plateau. The underground complex revealed by these surveys extends across an area exceeding several square kilometers, connecting the three main pyramids and the Sphinx through a network of chambers and passages that lie at depths ranging from 20 to over 100 meters below the surface. The architectural layout demonstrates geometric precision and coordinated planning that indicates the entire Giza complex functioned as an integrated facility rather than as separate monuments constructed independently. The chamber dimensions, orientations, and interconnection patterns parallel those found in Mesopotamian underground facilities associated with Anunnaki departure preparations. Initial exploration of accessible portions of this underground complex conducted through existing shafts and natural openings revealed construction techniques that exceed documented ancient Egyptian capabilities. The chambers incorporate precision stone cutting with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters, joining techniques that create seamless interfaces between massive blocks and architectural features that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of structural engineering principles. The construction materials include granite and basalt that originated from quarries hundreds of kilometers distant, requiring transportation and placement capabilities that remain unexplained by conventional archaeological models. The technological artifacts discovered within these chambers include crystalline devices mounted in metallic fixtures that closely resemble the communication equipment found in Mesopotamian temple complexes. The crystals demonstrate precise geometric forms that would require advanced cutting and polishing techniques, while the metallic components show evidence of manufacturing processes including casting, forging, and precision machining that employ methods not documented in ancient Egyptian metalworking. Chemical analysis of the metallic components reveals alloy compositions incorporating elements including titanium and other metals that were not officially available to ancient civilizations. The acoustic properties of the underground chambers demonstrate sophisticated architectural design for sound manipulation. Testing reveals that the chambers amplify specific frequency ranges while dampening others, creating acoustic environments that would enhance certain types of sound-based communication or resonance phenomena. The chamber dimensions and surface treatments create reverberation characteristics that can generate standing wave patterns at frequencies that influence human neurological activity, potentially facilitating altered consciousness states during ritual or communication activities. The astronomical alignments incorporated into the underground complex parallel those found in the surface pyramid structures, while adding additional layers of complexity accessible only from the subsurface chambers. Shafts connecting underground chambers to surface or sky openings create sight lines towards specific stellar positions that correspond to navigation markers along Anunnaki departure routes. The alignments track multiple stellar positions simultaneously, creating a three-dimensional navigation reference system that would enable precise celestial orientation determination from within the underground facilities. The preservation state of materials within the sealed chambers indicates they have remained undisturbed since their original construction and sealing during ancient times. The absence of later intrusions, the intact condition of artifacts, and the stable environmental conditions all suggest that the chambers were sealed deliberately using sophisticated preservation techniques intended to maintain their contents across millennia. This preservation parallels that found in Mesopotamian sealed archives and supports interpretations that the facilities served knowledge preservation and communication functions designed for long-term operation. The evidence presented throughout this investigation points to a profound conclusion that challenges conventional understanding of human history and development. The departure of the Anunnaki from direct involvement in human civilization represented not abandonment, but a calculated transition designed to enable humanity's independent development, while maintaining systems for monitoring, guidance, and potential intervention during crisis periods. The extraordinary sophistication of the preservation systems, communication protocols, and institutional structures established during the departure period demonstrates that the Anunnaki anticipated maintaining connection with Earth across millennia, despite their physical absence. The consistency of evidence across multiple domains, archaeological discoveries, ancient texts, astronomical knowledge, architectural precision, and modern phenomena creates a comprehensive case that cannot be dismissed through conventional explanations. The technological capabilities demonstrated in ancient artifacts exceed documented human achievements by substantial margins, indicating access to knowledge systems derived from more advanced sources. The mathematical precision of astronomical calculations, the sophistication of preservation technologies, and the long-term planning evident in institutional design all point to civilizational capabilities far exceeding those attributed to ancient humanity by mainstream historical models. The implications of this evidence extend far beyond academic questions about ancient history to encompass fundamental issues about humanity's origins, developmental trajectory, and future potential. If human civilization developed under sustained guidance from technologically advanced beings who withdrew to allow independent progress, then understanding this relationship becomes crucial for navigating current global challenges that may determine whether our civilization survives or joins previous cycles in collapse and regeneration. The knowledge preservation systems established by the Anunnaki may contain essential information for addressing contemporary crises, including environmental degradation, technological risks, and social breakdown that threaten civilizational continuity. The convergence of ancient prophetic timelines suggesting we are approaching a potential return window, the correlation of modern UFO phenomena with ancient descriptions of Anunnaki vehicles, and the continued operation of monitoring systems established during the departure period all indicate that the next phase of human-Anunnaki interaction may be imminent. Whether this represents genuine return of departed beings or activation of autonomous systems left behind, the implications demand serious consideration by those willing to examine evidence that challenges comfortable assumptions about humanity's place in cosmic history. The cumulative weight of evidence examined throughout this investigation compels a fundamental reconsideration of humanity's relationship with advanced non-human intelligences and the true nature of our civilizational development. The Anunnaki departure, far from representing mythological fantasy, emerges as a carefully orchestrated transition documented in administrative records, preserved in sophisticated technological installations, and commemorated in ritual traditions that maintained operational continuity across more than 4 millennia. The departure tablets from Nippur, the sealed underground archives, the astronomical navigation documentation, and the bloodline preservation programs collectively demonstrate planning sophistication and institutional coordination that could only result from actual historical events rather than gradual mythological elaboration. The evidence converges across multiple independent domains that conventional scholarship treats as unrelated. Archaeological discoveries of precision-engineered underground facilities match textual descriptions of departure preparations with remarkable specificity. Astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient star catalogues demonstrates observational capabilities and mathematical sophistication that preceded official human discovery of these principles by millennia. Genetic analysis of elite burials reveals morphological characteristics indicating non-human ancestry exactly where textual sources describe bloodlines of divine heritage. The consistency of this multi-domain correlation argues powerfully against dismissing the evidence as coincidental or misinterpreted. The preservation systems established during the departure period reveal expectations of maintaining connection across vast temporal spans that dwarf typical human planning horizons. The underground archives, designed to protect knowledge through multiple millennia of potential catastrophe, the communication protocols calculated to function during specific astronomical windows recurring every 3,600 years, and the hereditary priesthoods trained to maintain monitoring capabilities across countless generations, all demonstrate commitment to long-term relationship maintenance that treats the departure as temporary rather than permanent. This long-term perspective suggests the Anunnaki view human civilization as an ongoing project requiring periodic supervision rather than as a completed work requiring no further involvement. The correlation between ancient return prophecies and modern phenomena, including UFO reports, archaeological discoveries, and the approaching completion of calculated return cycles, indicates we may be entering the next active phase of this relationship. The mathematical precision of ancient chronological calculations, the geographic clustering of modern anomalous phenomena around ancient sacred sites, and the continued operation of monitoring systems established during the departure period all suggest that whatever mechanisms were established to govern Anunnaki-human interaction remain operational and may be approaching activation thresholds. Whether this represents literal return of departed beings or triggering of autonomous systems designed to respond to specific civilizational conditions, the implications demand serious consideration rather than reflexive dismissal based on paradigmatic assumptions that may no longer withstand evidential scrutiny. The knowledge preserved through mystery schools, secret societies, and hereditary lineages across millennia may contain essential guidance for navigating the transition ahead. Understanding that human civilization developed not through linear progress from primitive origins, but through cycles of advancement and collapse, punctuated by external interventions, provides crucial context for addressing contemporary global challenges. The ancient wisdom encoded in preserved texts, architectural monuments, and institutional traditions may offer solutions to problems that conventional approaches have failed to resolve. As we stand at what may be another pivotal moment in the long relationship between humanity and our extraterrestrial benefactors, the choice before us is whether to consciously engage with this legacy or to remain within comfortable but ultimately inadequate explanatory frameworks that deny the evidence of our true origins and developmental trajectory.